Hello and welcome to the sad duty we have at the Cine-Files, which is to honor and celebrate the great artists that we've lost. And just a couple of days ago, we lost Rutger Hauer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He is a big figure for me.
Okay.
More so than maybe the movies I think that I've seen.
Okay.
I mean, I've seen certainly, obviously the one that was most impactful and the one we're going to re-release today is Blade Runner, where he just steals the whole movie.
Yeah. He's the reason to watch the movie. And it's not just his incredibly fit shape, the blonde locks, the overall look of him. He's just cool, man.
Well, it takes a movie that it could be, well, this is just the bad guy.
Yeah.
And turns it into this complicated, compelling, sensitive, and really, and as you're going to hear in this conversation, it's one of my favorite episodes of our show is that maybe he's the good guy. Maybe that's the hero.
Yeah.
On some level. I mean, his story is so compelling. Mm-hmm. And of course, that moment at the end, which was I think he improvised a lot of that final speech.
Him and Ridley worked together to get that final speech. Yeah.
He's such a presence. I've seen Soldier of Orange, but not in a really, really long time.
Okay.
And can I tell you my guilty pleasure?
Please.
It's one of my favorite guilty pleasures. Blind Fury.
Yeah, I mentioned it today on the other day on Movie Talk when we were doing our tribute to him. I said he was great in everything he was in, even in something cheesy or walking the line like Blind Fury.
I mean, but it's like I consumed every martial artsy kind of thing, and of course this is sort of based on Zatachi Blind Swordsman, and I'd be terrified to watch it today. I haven't watched it in 15 years.
Really?
Does it hold up? Have you seen it recently?
I know it never held. I didn't hold up when I watched it in the 80s. So
totally
I'll be honest with
in
you.
the 80s.
So, but for me, it's Nighthawks. That's where it all starts.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Because I didn't know who Rutger Hauer was till I saw Nighthawks, and Nighthawks I watched because I was a Rocky fan, and it's Stallone. I'm like, I got to see Stallone.
So you saw that before you saw Blade Runner?
Before I saw Blade Runner.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was like to see Nighthawks because it was on TV. I remember watching it on TV and seeing what he did with that role, and you're like, oh, this guy's playing a terrorist, and what do you do with that? Yeah. And so for me, it was awesome to watch, and I became such a fan of his from there. And then seeing this, and I thought he was going to be this superstar.
Yeah.
Right?
It almost feels like he was. Do you know, in this weird way, it's like even though you can't, other than the few movies that we've mentioned, like you can't look to this huge career, and yet he's so impactful in terms of maybe, this is this weird thing is that sometimes one performance and you just locks you into people's brains. Yeah. And that Roy Baty performance in Blade Runner is huge.
Absolutely. And for so many reasons we spoke about on the episode of Blade Runner, his journey, him trying to find out who he is. You could argue, absolutely, you said at the beginning of this tribute, Steve, that he is the protagonist because his journey is the one we're following. Deckard's not on any kind of real journey. It's actually Baty who's on the journey to figure out why he was created, why he has determination, and what his reasons for existence are.
Well, and the more you think about Deckard, the more you're like, this is not a good guy.
No. Kills his own, possibly.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, even if the structure of the movie is that these are sentient beings, like that's sort of what we're going to discover. Well, he's the guy who's made a career of hunting down and killing sentient beings.
Yeah.
It's funny. I remember it's one of my favorite podcasts, this episode with Scott Mantz.
Definitely.
Two things I remember about it. One is that I came up with an idea which I still think is great, which is the story of those replicants and their escape.
Yeah.
Is like actually tell the story, a prequel of that world and the rebellion and the discovery of sentience. That's actually a cool idea.
I agree.
The other thing I remember, I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah.
We were sitting in my house recording the episode and I was arguing with Mantz about something.
I remember. Are you kidding? Of course.
And there was this moment where you gave me a look of like, what the hell are you doing?
Why are you trying to fight with our guests? Because this was the first episode I think we ever did with Scott.
Second.
Second.
Rathacon was first.
Oh, right. Rathacon was first. But I sensed there was a legitimate argument about to erupt between you two because there was no giving on the positions that you were taking.
See, and for me, it was just having an interesting disagreement about a point in film.
Right. And I was just concerned because I don't mind us having difference of opinion with the guests. That's kind of the fun part of the show.
Sure. But
I was afraid it was going to escalate. And it didn't, obviously. No. But there was that. I think that's one of the rare moments in time where I was worried.
I can't remember another one.
Yeah.
I remember remember the look you gave me was like, what the hell are you doing? And I went, and I had the moment of like, wait, what the hell am I doing? Like, is there a problem? Because I had no idea there was a problem.
Yeah.
So your mission as you listen to this episode is see if you can figure out the moment that Rocha gave me that look.
I know, right. See if you can hear it through our words.
Through our voices.
Through our voices, yeah, definitely.
So we did want to take a moment to honor Rutger Hauer, and really we did want to re-release one of our favorite episodes. Yeah. So sit back and relax and enjoy going back in time to our discussion with the great Scott Mantz of Ridley Scott's Blade Runner.
They're just questions, Leon. In answer to your query, they're written down for me. It's a test designed to provoke an emotional response. Shall we continue? Describe in single words only the good things that come into your mind. About your mother?
My mother?
Yeah.
Let me tell you about my mother.
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where each week we enter the world of a great film. We explore its themes, its history, the filmmaking, and the influence it has on us today. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. I'm John Rocha. You guys have heard me many times on this show already. So I'm a voiceover artist, actor, host of shows in LA, and I am crazy super excited for this episode of the Cine-Files.
And we are very happy to welcome back to our microphones one of our greatest and possibly most requested guests of all time, Scott Mantz from Access
right?
Hollywood. I think so.
Right?
I think we can fairly say that, yes.
Wow, fellas, it is great to be back here talking movies with you. If the only way to follow The Wrath of Khan, the Citizen Kane of Star Trek movies, is by talking about the most influential sci-fi movie of all time. You could say that might be 2001, it might be Planet of the Apes. I think it's Blade Runner, and it is my number one favorite movie of all time.
Wow.
Bar none.
That's amazing.
So when you come back on the Cine-Files from this point forward, it's all downhill.
It's downhill from here, boys.
Every movie you're going to like less than what we're talking about right now.
Well, listen, and by the way, for those of you who don't know me, then shame on you, but I'm the film critic for Access Hollywood, and I do a bunch. I do Schmoes No, I do movie fights. Yes. I used to do a show called Profiles, and I do Q&As and panels throughout Los Angeles and cover film festivals around the country.
That was an excellent back introduction of my poor introduction. Well done, sir.
Thank you.
I salute you. And yes, the movie we're talking about is Blade Runner. And since this is your favorite film of all time, I can't wait to find out. How did you first come to it?
Okay, well, it is my favorite movie of all time, fellas, but it was not always my favorite movie of all time. In fact, when I saw it on June 25th, 1982, the same weekend that John Carpenter's The Thing opened. Right. The same month that E.T. the Extraterrestrial, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and Poltergeist opened.
Wow.
I mean, what a month. June of 1982. Incredible. You know, I was coming off these movies, and I thought it was going to be an exciting science fiction film. I was thinking of Harrison Ford, The Empire Strikes Back, Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark. So, 13-year-old kid goes in to see Blade Runner and walks out of the theater scratching his head going, what the hell was that? I did not like it at all. And a lot of people didn't get it. It bombed on its first release.
Right.
But the way I really came to understand and really get Blade Runner was I moved to California from Philadelphia in 1991. So 1992 was the 10th anniversary of Blade Runner. It was also the release of the director's cut.
Right.
So when I saw the director's cut, I had 10 years of perspective on film.
Right.
I also was grown up. So when I went to the New Art Theater in West LA and saw the director's cut, which got rid of Harrison Ford's god-awful voiceover and added in a short, very brief dream sequence with a unicorn, mind blown. My whole perspective on the film changed, and it immediately shot up to one of my favorite movies of all time. And when the final cut came out in 2007, the 25th anniversary of Blade Runner, it was now my number one favorite movie of all time. It grew on me, and I think that's why it stays there.
So, and you've already answered one of the things that I know we're going to talk about, which is now I know which version you prefer. It's very, very clear.
Right.
John, how about you?
I came to it on video, like on VHS. I remember it was one of the first films I rented because once again, I think I was 12, 13, 14 years old, and I started to read articles about films because I was so getting into this idea of loving films so much. And this was one that people talked about in film magazines as being like classic and ahead of its time and whatever. And so when I watched it, I absolutely loved it. And the voiceover didn't bother me as much because that last scene when he says what he says to him in voice, I don't know why he let me live. There was just something about that affected me, and the noir aspect of it all was so awesome. And I'm such a fan of the rain that to me the film is all dark and rainy, and to me it just spoke all levels. And the romance between him and Sean Young, for whatever reason, it struck an incredibly powerful chord with me.
So you liked it the first time you saw it?
I did. I liked it the first time I saw it, and I would rent it over and over again every few months. And then when the director's cut came out, and I remember I went to see it in the theater. I think it was downtown in DC at the Uptown, and without any voiceover, I loved it even more. And the unicorn thing was so amazing because that was when I was starting to read articles about whether is Deckard a replicant, and so you're just like, whoa! So the film never ages for me. I still think it's the greatest science fiction film ever made. I think the special effects still hold up to 2017. Rewatched it again for this podcast, and there's only two scenes where I think the special effects doesn't 100% look real. But other than that, the film is still powerful. I think the narrative still works. And so for me, it has been a film that's always echoed in my heart. Always. Just always. Something about Harrison Ford's performance, Sean Young's beautifulness captured at this time, and Rutger Hauer's ruthlessness. Yeah, just all of it. And watching it over and over again, and just like the great films we talk about, Steve, on this podcast, you get something new out of it every time you watch it, no matter where you are in life. Yeah.
What about you, Steve? How about the first time you saw it?
So I don't know. I cannot. Strangely enough, I can't remember the first time. And usually if I saw it in a theater, I can usually remember the theater, and I can't remember the theater. So it's very possible I didn't see it in the theater. Yeah. But I saw it soon after. I think, because I'm starting high school in '83, and I know it was in that VHS rotation, and I loved it with the voiceover. I definitely remember going to see it seeing the director's cut at the Grand Lake Theater in Oakland when it came out, and I remember I'd seen the theatrical cut so many times that I could hear the voiceover playing.
Interesting.
That's great.
I knew what every...
You saw the voiceover version that many times where even when you're watching it without it, you're still hearing it.
I could still hear it.
Okay.
And so one of the interesting things about this movie, because we have multiple versions, I think there are like 6 versions total, is that I can't not have the experience with the theatrical version and really turn that off. So it's a little hard for me to go, because I probably saw it 20, 30, 40 times at least, because we rented it over and over again. Yep. And I think I had it on VHS for a long time. And so it was a long time before I saw the director's cut.
Right.
And for me, it's sort of, I loved that theatrical version. I love the director's cut for different reasons. They're different films in a lot of ways. And it's funny though, because I went through, in doing research for this, I went through and went, okay, what are all the changes? They're not that many.
Yeah. No, there's not.
It's very few.
It's not like you're watching like Star Wars A New Hope with the special edition where there's so many changes to it.
Right, or like Apocalypse Now Redux where
Apocalypse Now Redo.
Totally different movie. So I think to start on this, the first person we really got to talk about is Philip K. Dick. People talk about, I always heard this thing of like, there's the ABCs of science fiction: Asimov, Bradbury, and Clark.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the D to me.
Yeah, Dick. Right.
Not that he's as good a writer, I would say. I don't know if you've read some of his stuff.
Some of it.
They're okay. But the ideas in terms of science fiction, he's some of the greatest ideas, and he's given us more science fiction movies than anyone I can think of.
Yeah.
Between Total Recall and Minority Report and
Waking Life.
Right.
Yeah. Scanner Darkly. Right. And then we got Man in the High Castle. Right. And the sort of ideas of what is real, what is not, and this speculation about what it is to be alive, and how does your brain work, and what is consciousness, and what is all of those things. That's really, really deep in what science fiction is.
And a lot of the themes that Philip K. Dick has explored in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is the story that Blade Runner is based on, were explored in other films that Philip K. Dick. The adaptations of those movies, but also just in other films, period. Like you look at the last, let's see, what is it, almost 30 years, now that Blade Runner came out.
Yeah.
And wait, 82.
35.
Yeah, it's almost 35 years. Yeah.
Man, good gosh.
Yeah.
Man, math is not my strong point. Movie release dates
Yes,
are my
sure.
strong point, not math. I don't know why. That's so
I'd
weird.
pay attention to this for your next Schmodown.
Yeah, that's right,
This
that's
is
right.
where you could take him. Is
Yeah,
somehow
take me
him
down
into
with the math. 2 + 4. What? Oh, but really, guys, when you look at a lot of movies that have come out since then, like Strange Days,
Right.
City of Lost Children, one of my other favorite movies of all time, Children of Men,
Yeah,
Minority Report, which is obviously based on Philip K. Dick, but also just recently you had Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah.
And not a good film.
Nope.
But I'm watching the movie going, it's Blade Runner. These
Especially
themes,
the landscapes on the buildings, the Japanese stuff,
it's
all of
so
it.
the cyberpunk.
Yep.
It is freaking Blade Runner, and
Yep.
I'm watching Ghost in the Shell, going like, I'd rather be watching Blade Runner.
Right.
And I'm thinking about Blade Runner while watching Ghost in the Shell, thinking this movie is 35 years old, and it still looks like it
Yeah.
could have been shot today. It's still ahead of its time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, looks better, honestly.
Yeah.
Because and we're going to get into this in detail, obviously, but A, it looks amazing, and B, it's real.
Yes.
And that's the thing. We CG has come so far, and it's so amazing, but this real is still real.
Yeah.
And when you see real things and real humans interacting with real stuff, it's just different.
I just love the sequence with the cop car when he's like questioning.
Center,
Yeah, it's just like just the exhaust coming out as it's levitating out is just so believable, and it doesn't look like it's on strings or anything like that. It looks so real, and it's those little things that make you feel like you are actually in the world that you are watching.
And
It's so great.
also too, a lot of those billboards have been taken down in LA now because people were complaining that they were distracting, and like people who lived in those areas didn't like having the lights shining in their windows. But for a few years there around LA and in New York and some other cities too, big cities around the country, you had the virtual billboards.
Yes.
Right.
And as soon as I started seeing those, especially on Sunset Boulevard in West Hollywood, the first thing I thought of was Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Me too. Same thing. Well, there's so much in this movie that is, there are things obviously that our world doesn't look like this world, but there are a lot of things where like, that's it.
Absolutely.
So we start with Philip K. Dick, and the first screenwriter they bring on is Hampton Fancher, and he, I think, really gets developed in that post-Star Wars, post-Alien, science fiction is big money. Let's see what we can do, and it starts off as a fairly small budget movie.
It started off as a fairly small
Yeah.
and it turned into one of the most notorious shoots in Hollywood history.
Wow.
And who do you think is responsible for that change from small budget to notorious?
Well, listen, the studio that released the film was Warner Brothers. The director who worked on the film, Ridley Scott. We have to talk about Ridley Scott. I don't know if this is the right time to really intro him, but
Absolutely.
the only big studio film he had done prior to this was John Roca's favorite Ridley Scott movie called Alien.
Yes.
And we have argued about the Alien versus Blade Runner elsewhere in our infamous one-on-one Screen Junkies 2-hour plus marathon movie fights that everyone says that Roca should have won. And I have to say, truth be told, you crushed that, brother.
Don't stop it.
You should have won that damn thing,
Well,
especially the last question, where I had to fight in favor of Moonlight. I did such a poor job of that. Jeez. Anyway.
Tell Andy that.
Oh, geez.
Give up your spot then.
We're
Give it up.
digressing here because we can digress.
Yes.
But, Ridley Scott was still an up-and-comer. He was a visionary because of what he had accomplished on Alien.
Yeah.
But he was working with I believe an American crew for the first time.
Right.
And it was a trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. The crew did not like his style. He was not an easy director to work with. The shoot from start to finish was very difficult. It went way over budget. It went way over schedule. He was a stickler for the details, which is a good thing. I mean, you want a director who's going to do that. But at the same time, the crew started calling the film not Blade Runner, Blood Runner.
Wow.
And also, Will Rogers had that saying, I never met a man I didn't like. Well, the crew started making T-shirts that said, Will Rogers never met Ridley Scott. Oh, man. So, wow. and then, he butted heads with Sean Young. He butted heads with Harrison Ford. But in the end, it's a masterpiece.
Yeah. No, this is something we've come up over and over again on the Cine-Files, which is a lot of times these great directors aren't necessarily so nice,
right?
Not so easy to work with, and not necessarily liked during the process. We came up against it in Apocalypse Now. We came up against it in The Shining.
Charlie Chaplin, Modern Times. Yeah.
It's interesting, like James Cameron, he shoots with a British crew on Aliens. They didn't like him.
Yeah.
He had a real rough time. And James Cameron, also stickler for the details, obsessive about being right and getting things done his way.
Titanic.
Yeah. I mean, this is something we're going to see over and over again with filmmakers. There are also Ron Howard and Rob Reiner and people that are lovely to work with.
Yeah, sure.
Steven Spielberg's not supposed to be like this. But there's some people that are like this.
Well, I would defend a little bit Ridley Scott to be like, well, sometimes American crews can be very, very, can be jerks, can be assholes because they want their breaks. Teamsters, you've seen that in unions. They can be quite like real anal retentive about stuff and pushy about stuff. And, that can be hard for a British filmmaker who's used to the British crews being a bit more malleable. So that's going to happen, right? And there's natural resentment at times between American versus British. That has been around since the dawn of this country. So it's not a surprise that at times it creeps in. So maybe some of that was going on there too, So it's certainly, none of us were on the set, so it's certainly possible.
Well, I was going to bring up Francis Ford Coppola and Apocalypse Now.
Oh, right, yeah.
I mean, like after the two Godfather films in the conversation, he put everything, and I mean everything, into the making of Apocalypse Now, including mortgaging his house to finish it up. And that saying in the film, never get off the boat. Well, Coppola got off the boat when that movie was finished because he has never made a masterpiece since.
Yes. No. That's a great point.
That was it. He had 4 great movies in the 70s. Yep. And, then he did, what was it, The Outsiders, and, like Peggy Sue Got Married, but nothing ever equated his Rainmaker. Yeah, right. I mean, he never equated that.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
No, it's absolutely true. I mean, it seems like that movie broke him.
Yeah. Yeah.
On some, well, what we should say, most filmmakers don't have more than, you have 3 or 4 great masterpieces. You did good.
Right. Well, look at, Spielberg's masterpiece films. He's actually a director who's had maybe 6 or 7.
Yeah.
Because you have Jaws, Close Encounters, Raiders, E.T., Schindler's List, Private Ryan. Those, 6.
Yeah.
Really 4, though.
What's that?
Yeah, really 4.
4.
Yeah, E.T. and Private Ryan can go.
What? Well, E.T. is a masterpiece.
It's not a masterpiece.
Come on. It is a masterpiece.
It's not the movie fights. We're not on movie fights. Not movie fights.
It's not movie fights. But there are so many other elements. There's the direction. There's obviously the cinematography.
Yeah.
There is the production design, the costume design, and the music. The score is brilliant.
Oh, you're talking for Blade Runner?
Yeah, for Blade Runner.
The Vangelis.
Oh my gosh. Score. That score.
Is it Vangelis or Vangelis? I've never known.
I say Vangelis.
Vangelis.
It's probably Vangelis. Who knows?
Well, you could. Anyone out there who knows, if Mr. Vangelis or Vangelis are there, you could come talk to us.
Yeah, come talk to us. Correct us. We will happily stand corrected if we're corrected by you, sir.
I don't buy many soundtracks, and I bought the soundtrack score for this film and for Chariots of Fire. Chariots of Fire is one of my favorite films, bar none, and I love his score for both of these movies.
The problem with the soundtracks that have been officially released for Blade Runner is that none of them are the complete scores.
Right. Yes. Agreed.
So years ago, I went on eBay and someone was selling a bootleg version of the complete score to Blade Runner.
Wow.
So, I bought it and I thought, I was thinking it would be like a muffled copy. It would not be up to par with the official version. And it is.
Wow.
It is it's a 2-disc set that has all of the music, every last note of that film.
Yeah.
And even some of the background atmosphere, when he's going through Anemoid Row, everything. And when he first enters the Bradbury building, and here, he's going up the stairs and it's cutting to Priss, sort of going back and forth. Yeah. It is every note. I'll make a copy for you guys.
Definitely. I would love that.
Well, what's interesting about the score is it happens at that moment, which is, it's a synth score. And there's a lot of times you listen to a synth score from the early 80s and you go, ugh. That sounds like a synth score from the early 80s. This sounds like the score to Blade Runner. You know, it's the same thing we saw, again, it's funny we keep coming back to it, but Apocalypse Now also synth score, late 70s, and it's a great score. And it's interesting, like when people use these technological tools that have to advance, are going to advance so much in the next 30 years, and they use them perfectly. And this is such a great example. One of the things I didn't know is I didn't know that Ridley Scott was going to make Dune before this.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So he
was
actually developing Dune. They were doing set designs, and then I guess his elder brother died right before making this film. Really shook him up, and he decided not to do Dune and jumped over to Blade Runner. And I was thinking about us watching Blade Runner because it is. You know, I hadn't seen it in a long time, by the way. So I'd seen it a ton. Right. I don't even know if I'd seen it in the last 5 years. And so watching again, it's like, and watching the final cut, which is what I watched for the show. Yeah, it's like, man, this is a movie's got a lot of heaviness.
Oh yeah,
you know, it weighs on you. And I was thinking about Ridley Scott, this event of his brother's death, and coming in and driving the crew and driving this production in this extremely intense way. And I can't say that those things are connected, but maybe they are.
I think you're right to say they're connected, Steve, because it explores death. The whole film explores death,
and
right?
Life.
And life, exactly. Even that sequence of Roy Baty confronts Tyrell. He says, "I want what you might not be able to give me. I want more life.
I want more life."
Yeah, and Tyrell says. Yeah, right. And Tyrell says what he says, and that's the exploit. That's everything comes to that scene. Everything leads to that scene of him, which is almost an hour and a half into the movie, or an hour and 20 minutes in the movie, and it finally happens. And he confronts him, and he has that conversation. He wants more life, and this is the whole thing. So maybe he's working out these things about the death of his brother.
Maybe
like he'd want him to, like, how could his brother have lived longer? Like, how is this possible if it was a surprise or something that wasn't expected? And so I love that. I'm sure that influenced what was going on.
And the relationship, I think, between the meaning of your life and your longevity. You know, like what is the value? Who am I? And what is the value that I bring to the world? And particularly based on how long am I going to live? What if my days are numbered? You know,
the light that burns shortest burns brightest, and you have shone so brightly, Roy.
It's such a great scene.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that.
Yeah, definitely.
So Hampton Fancher is writing the script. The original title is Dangerous Days, because I guess they didn't want to do Android's Dream of Electric Sheep, which I actually really like that title, by the way. Title. And they bring in Ridley Scott, and man, as soon as Ridley Scott comes into this production, it sounds like it's just a whirlwind. Like, he is changing things every single day. Every single day things aren't good enough. The script is constantly changing. Every time he walks into a design meeting, looks at a set, everything is constantly changing. There was something one of the producers said. He said something like, every time Ridley Scott picks up a pencil, it's going to cost you hundreds of dollars. Every time he picks up a pen, it's going to cost you thousands. And one of some of the great influences is, because we know that, as we talked about when we did Alien, that Ridley Scott has a design background. I mean, this is a guy who really understands his way around visuals, and some of the influence he's really had was Mobius, the great comic book artist. Right. And you could see his influence in it. He also brings in Sid Mead, and I think they brought in Sid Mead for like $1,500 a day to come work for a couple of days, but then he ended up working for months and months and months, which cost him a lot of money. And you could see his design, throughout this whole thing. And when it gets, and the budget starts going, because it's supposed to be a small budget movie, starts going up, and that's when they have to bring in Warner Brothers and Alan Ladd Jr.
Well, no, you talk about the production design, you talk about the visual effects. Douglas Trumbull. Trumbull, who was who did the groundbreaking effects for 2001: A Space Odyssey. He did the effects for Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and at the last minute, he jumped in to basically save Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Which, if you ask Douglas Trumbull about Star Trek: The Motion Picture to this day, he still shrugs his shoulders and goes like, "Oh, the movie was a mess," and it was. But Blade Runner, on the other hand, like with the way when you see the spinners flying around, you see the glow around the lights. Yeah. That came from that was very evident in the special effects for Close Encounters as well.
Right.
And the cityscape, Los Angeles, 2019. Yeah. That when you're watching the movie for the first time in 1982, it feels like a long way off. Yeah. Well, as of this taping, it is 2.5 years away. Yeah. Can you imagine how apeshit fans are going to go when they go to see the original Blade Runner in theaters in November of 2019, especially in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be great.
Yeah. Can we make a date?
Yes.
Yeah,
oh,
done.
my
Let's
God.
do it.
Right now. Let's get our tickets now.
Yeah.
It's going to be at the Cinerama Dome in Hollywood.
Oh,
sure.
it's gotta be,
We're there.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Love that.
They ended up they wanted to shoot some on locations, but they couldn't find locations that are going to look right, and so they shoot on the Warner backlot. And one thing I just want to say is the buildings that are in this movie are ones that every single person listening to this right now has seen hundreds and hundreds of times because it's the Warner backlot. And that backlot has been there for 50 years, and they've shot TV shows and movies and all sorts of stuff on those buildings, and you would never know that you are looking at anything you have ever seen before in the way that this thing is designed.
It is crazy how much they transform that backlot. Whenever I go to Warner Brothers, let's say I go if I go for a press screening, I always try to give myself enough time to get there early and go back to that backlot because it's not far from where the press screenings are.
Right.
And I just I'll look down the street and it's bare, but when Ridley Scott was making Blade Runner, the transformation of that backlot with all the detail and all the props and all the lights and the wires and the rain, this never-ending rain. And like you said, John, the film noir.
Yeah.
It is a perfect blend on many levels because it is it is the past and the future. It is, the cyberpunk element to it.
Yeah.
There's so many elements that blend the past and the future in such a perfect way that really even other films that are inspired by it don't come close to matching it.
Yeah.
No, it's absolutely true. And what you say about them combining these genres, it's so interesting to me because when we did Alien, that's a science fiction horror film. And this is a science fiction detective film, and particularly noir.
Yes.
And even though they're doing this futuristic vision, one of the things that's so brilliant is to create that vision, they're drawing from the past. And there's this 40s looks to the costumes and the way people talk. And this is, and we talked about this when we talked about Alien, is that one of the great design elements of Alien is that is a lived-in world.
Yeah.
It's not a pristine world like we would see in Star Trek or these other places. It has dirt in it, and people pick out their clothes, and their clothes are wrinkled, and they sweat, and they smoke, and they live. And in this one, same thing. We are in a lived-in science fiction world, not a pristine one.
Even the sequences, Steve, I would say, like when he first encounters Emmett Walsh pulling out the full bottle of liquor with the 2 shot glasses. The when they're watching the interview, it's the blue hue of the projector, that kind of thing. All that vibe is there. Even Emmett Walsh's look and clothes, and Edward D. James Olmos's hat, his cane, all of it is very, very 40s. The trench coat is a little bit. It's kind of, you don't know what era that's from that Harrison Ford is wearing. It doesn't necessarily scream 40s, but it feels close enough that it feels evocative of that. And the one song in the film where you actually hear lyrics sounds like a 40s song,
dear,
right?
one more time.
It's just
but just because you mentioned the wardrobe, and to give it that noir look, but a futuristic look at noir is the trench coats. And at one point during the development, they wanted Harrison Ford to wear a hat, just like the Marlowe did back in the day.
Right.
Well, he had just done a movie where he wore a hat called Raiders of the Lost Ark, and he did not want to wear a hat again. So his hairstyle was originally just going to be, parted to the side like it was in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Right. And then he shows up with this buzz cut, and people, were like, okay. He just wanted to look different. He didn't want to look just like he did in his previous movie, even though the studio would have been perfectly happy with that to sort of ride the wave of Raiders into Blade Runner. That probably would have helped the box office of Blade Runner.
And this is funny that I hadn't thought about it until you mentioned it, because I had never heard that story, but I remember seeing it. Can't remember if it was in a theater or not, but finding that hairstyle so jarring in the early 80s. Like, it was so different, and I so loved him as Han Solo and Indiana Jones, and this was a completely different thing. One thing I didn't know about the casting process is that they were talking to Dustin Hoffman.
What? Dustin Hoffman, not only were they talking to him, but he had, as Deckard, he was so involved with the development of that film. that a lot of the notes that he gave were used. And when it came around to Harrison Ford doing the role, he liked Dustin Hoffman's changes so much that that's why he agreed to do the film.
Good God, I can't even imagine.
I can't either. It's one of the weirdest.
Well, listen, anytime you have an actor own and crush a role like that, you cannot imagine anyone else playing the role.
Yeah, I guess so.
I cannot imagine anyone else but Emma Stone playing Mia in La La Land.
I could.
Can you imagine
Brie Larson.
If Emma Watson was going to play that role, because she was originally, or Brie Larson?
Brie Larson would have killed it.
Brie Larson, the next Meryl Streep? No! Oh my God. Movie Fighters crossing over into the Cine-Files.
You brought it over.
Make it stop.
Maybe we should talk about this movie.
Yeah.
Maybe we should jump in.
What's the next
thing?
So we're going. So we start off with one of the most amazing special effects shots I think in Hollywood history, which is what they call it the Hades shot, which is this camera moving in over these smokestacks in this version of LA that's just remarkable.
Dystopian.
Yeah.
Dystopian was the word that was with a capital D went into overdrive with Blade Runner. That opening shot, before you even see that, the title card.
Yeah.
Los Angeles, November 2019, and then the smokestacks are blowing up, and the fire and the brimstone,
and you combine that with the score, because right from the first note of the score is boom. So you understand. Yeah, this is what we're dealing with.
Right.
The darkness, just a darkness, and the fire coming out amongst the things, amongst the landscape. All of it just puts you in a place feeling factories, feeling this kind of, once again, this combination of future and past. Past being the factories of the Industrial Revolution combined with the advancement of electronics. So we have this combination is so great right from the beginning, and then you hear the synthesizer music kick up as you're going across. Because what are you flying in? You're flying in this futuristic thing right from the beginning.
And guys, cut in with those images of the hovering over the cityscape. There is an eye.
Yeah.
Right.
There is an eye. And it is never explained.
Nope.
It is never revealed whose eye it is.
Yes.
And it gave me chills to hear Ridley Scott himself address that very scene at the beginning of Blade Runner. And he says, the reason that is there, you think you are watching the film. The film is watching you.
That's awesome.
Wow.
And again, there's no callback to the eye. You don't know whose it is.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't pull back to reveal a face. It's just you're flying over LA and this eye, which is reflecting the explosions of the smokestacks of the industrial landscape wasteland of Los Angeles, is watching you.
Yeah.
Very 1984.
Yep.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I was thinking back and going, in almost all the science fiction we've gotten up to this point, with the exception of Planet of the Apes, which is a different thing, we have always gotten a fair share of Nito. Of look at the future.
Yeah.
Look at the cool stuff.
Yeah.
Even in Alien, which is a really dark film, it's still, we're traveling in space and we're seeing aliens and these beautiful designs. And in this movie, it's saying your future might not be so good.
Yeah.
Look at what the real future is going to look like. Here are the consequences of the choices we're making. And one thing just about that effect shot, because we just have to keep reminding our audience that every single thing they see is real.
Yeah.
Even if it's a matte painting, like somebody really painted that.
Yeah.
And this shot going up through those smokestacks and everything, I think it's like 17 passes. These are motion-controlled cameras that have to do pass after pass after pass. It's forced perspective on the way they did these kind of etched-out little model sessions so that things are bigger in the foreground and getting smaller and smaller to create the sense of depth. And each explosion is its own pass. The time, the weeks of detailed by hand work that it takes to make a shot like this is amazing.
CGI, not even even in Blade Runner. I mean, the first CGI shot ever was used in Wrath of Khan for the Genesis planet sequence, but that was not even. It was nothing. CGI before anybody knew what CGI was.
Right. Yeah. And after this amazing effects and music opening, we go right into this very strange and always to me really distressing interview.
Yeah,
the tension in it is really high.
You're in a desert, walking along in the sand when all of a sudden...
Is this the test now?
Yes, you're in a desert, walking along in the sand when all of a sudden you look
What
down.
one?
What?
What desert?
Doesn't make any difference what desert. It's completely hypothetical.
But how come I'd be there?
Maybe you're fed up. Maybe you want to be by yourself. Who knows? You look down and you see a tortoise, Leon. It's crawling towards
Tortoise? What's that?
you. You know what a turtle is?
Of course.
Same thing.
We don't understand what's happening. We don't know why we're here. We don't know what these questions are. And it's stressful, and we don't know why it's stressful.
Right.
Well, and also the sounds of everything, right? The electronic sounds he brings over from Alien. The idea of the clip. You hear these things.
Yeah,
you
you do hear sounds. The sound effects are very reminiscent of Aliens, which is just 3 years before.
Right.
But so when Leon is taking the Voight Comp test, which is being used to determine whether or not he's a replicant.
Right.
So the questions, he comes in, he sits down, and Brian James, the late great actor Brian James. Is being given the Voight Comp test, and it's an unnerving sequence because not only is there tension between these guys, but you don't
understand it.
Why are they doing it? Like, what kind of an interview is
this? Yeah, and also the way he's cutting him off in the questions unsettles you, right? From the beginning, you're unsettled with the score, with the sound, with the factories, with the fire, all this stuff. Then this interview, and the interview is unsettling too because it's not a normal conversation. It's not clipped at a normal pace. It's faster. It's more jarring. It's cutting. There's no respect being given one way or the other, right? And then there's a pullback. Well, these are just questions and answer to your query. They're given to me, blah, 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 and then boom.
By the way, I can't tell you how many times I've said in answer to your query. In answer to your query is just a thing that comes out of my mouth all the time.
That's awesome.
And the thing, too, is you sense that this is important.
Yeah.
That something really serious is happening, but you don't know what that serious thing is. It's a very distressing scene.
Well, let me ask you, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of your mother? My mother? I'll tell you about my mother.
Let me tell you about my mother.
Boom.
Yeah. Shocking.
Well, and it's loud.
And through the wall. Yes,
through
and
the
it's
wall.
loud, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
it
On
is
purpose.
loud, and he goes through the damn wall.
Right.
By the way, the actor who's doing the interview is a guy named Morgan Paul, and he was the guy who played Harrison Ford's parts in all the auditions. So he was the reader that Ridley Scott used. And after they finish all this, and he was, because you're an actor, you're happy he got to meet Ridley Scott, but it really said, hey, we might have something for you.
Yeah. He was doing all the screen tests with like Sean Young and everything.
That's great.
Now we get to meet Harrison Ford. We talked about as Deckard. And we get to also meet the streets of Los Angeles in this. Wow.
Which feels like Tokyo, right? It feels a little like Los Angeles, Tokyo, right? Like what happened in Big Hero 6, San Frocchio or whatever they have. It feels the same.
Of Blade Runner watching Big Hero 6 because it was, the East meets the West.
Exactly.
And, he's eating Chinese food.
Yeah.
Four. I love that. And noodles. And, he's sitting there, he's reading the paper, and he's like looking up. He sees the airship that says, off-world colonies, a new world, begin again. and then he's interrupted by Gaff.
Edward James Olmos, who I love. He's one of my favorite actors. He's a fantastic actor. And what I learned is that a lot of the city speak, all that stuff, that's his. Edward James almost came up with that.
Speak, right? That's another language.
Yeah.
Admiral Kovishin Engam Bitek. He say you under arrest, Mr. Deckard.
Got the wrong guy, pal.
Lopa, Nehojma. Devaja Blake, he say you Blade Runner.
Tell him I'm eating.
Well, and that Edward James almost said because Ridley Scott had this idea of this multicultural world, which, you look at Los Angeles today. It is the most, I believe, most culturally diverse city on the planet.
I agree.
Trump's nightmare.
And so Edward James almost said he should speak some pidgin of, and I think there's Hungarian, there's Chinese, there's French, there's all these different languages that he's speaking. And again, this is where, having seen the theatrical version so many times, I can't not hear Harrison Ford say, of course I understood the lingo, but I wasn't going to make this easy on him. That's just in my head, because I've seen it so many times.
Right.
So Harrison Ford goes off with Edward James Olmos. And we got us, I think you mentioned it before.
Yeah.
His look in this movie is spectacular.
Yeah.
You know, and this goes to just a filmmaking thing. In general, directors out there, don't make your characters neutral.
Yeah.
There was so many students where I asked them, what kind of costumes are your characters wearing? And they go, oh, jeans and a t-shirt. Now, I wear jeans and a t-shirt like every day. I wear it all the time.
Yeah.
But that is a boring costume choice.
Right.
Edward James Olmos in Blade Runner is not a boring he is a dandy.
Yes.
He is like every little bit of him is to the nines.
Mm-hmm. He's got a cane.
Yeah.
He's got a cane.
Which again evokes the best of noir because of Maltese Falcon. Like there's these little subtle homages to noir that are there if you have them in your subconscious. He's hitting you on certain levels. The way the hat, the brim of the hat, everything about it just screams the noir stuff that you remember from the 40s and 50s. And for me, personally, I've always loved this idea because there's not a lot of Latinos in sci-fi. We don't seem to break this barrier a lot. And so to know that Gaff was Edward James Olmos meant so much to me growing up. And because I became a huge Miami Vice fan as well, to go back and see the movie again and again with Edward James Olmos, and of course Zoot Suit as well. But like, this is the one. And they don't make a big
Edward
deal
James
about it.
Olmos in Zoot Suit is like a miracle.
Yeah.
His performance is so amazing.
Agreed. And Stand and Deliver, he's fantastic in that as well.
Yeah.
But the thing with him is that there's no comment made about it. He doesn't speak Spanish, so you know he's Spanish. It doesn't effing matter.
Right.
He is who he is. His name is Gaff, and he is given very little screen time, but he makes the most out of it as an actor would.
In fact,
A good actor
guys,
would.
he makes so much of his screen time, his brief screen time,
And barely any lines.
Yeah.
and hardly any lines. But gentlemen, the movie is called Blade Runner. You think the movie's about Harrison Ford? You think the movie is about Deckard? The movie Blade Runner is about Gaff.
Listen to this.
Okay, hold on.
The movie,
This is a controversial
All right, go.
statement.
Wait, the movie Blade Runner is about Edward James Olmos.
What?
Now, this is a comment I am making at the top of the show, and we are going to revisit it at the end of the show.
Listen,
it's going to leave
okay.
you listening with that little nugget.
That's good because
The
I
movie
actually
Blade Runner, Gaff is the Blade Runner.
Wow.
Let's continue, shall we? Okay, so
we
Rick
go
and
meet
Dick
Emmett
Deckard.
Walsh.
Right.
Emmett Walsh. Who's
But before that, you get in the spinner.
Oh, in the spinner, sure.
Right.
You get in the spinner with Gaff, and you're hearing a lot of the sort of sound effects that you heard in Alien. So the spinner ascends, the exhaust shoots out from the bottom of the spinner,
Yeah, I
it
love
lifts
that.
off, and the score kicks in.
Yeah.
Wee, 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 wee. And you are flying above LA. You are seeing some of the buildings look very much like the past.
Yes.
Most of them look very much like the future. And if you look closely, you could see an upright Millennium Falcon.
Oh, yes.
Yes, you can see an upright
Yes.
Millennium Falcon if you're looking closer in the foreground
Right.
during that scene. And Harrison Ford, Deckard is eating his noodles along the ride,
Yep.
and you're above Los Angeles, thinking this is both beautiful and menacing. At the same time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then it descends. Okay, you're above Los Angeles, futuristic, and then when you get back down to Earth in the literal sense, you are in Union Station.
Union Station. Yeah.
Which is where the police are. Which is where we meet Emmett Walsh.
Who's a great character actor.
Oh, yeah.
Plays a truly horrible person in this, and he pressures Deckard into I need the old magic back. You got to come back and be a Blade Runner one more
Stop
time.
right where you are. If you're not one of us, you're little people.
Yeah.
And again, I hear the voiceover. I can hear the voiceover for that moment. So, and Deckard agrees, and now we're going to get a briefing where we're going to replay this interview.
No choice, huh, pal? No choice, pal.
Yeah, he's a horrible person.
So,
he's a mean person.
So we get that interview, and it's so funny. The interview are different takes. You can tell it's a different take than the one they used in what we just watched.
Right.
He's more relaxed in the delivery. Brian James is in the delivery of these lines that he said before. Let me tell you about my mother. It isn't as menacing.
Yeah, you're right. It
It's a
does look
little
like
more
they're
relaxed,
different takes.
which to me speaks to something, because if we're having him voiceover, it's supposed to be how Harrison Ford sees it, right? If he's the voiceover, he's the eyes and ears that we're supposed to be following as the protagonist. And so maybe that's what he sees when he's looking at this. Because why? If he's a replicant, he won't see the evil of another replicant. He sees the logic of the replicant. So to me, in that moment, he is watching this interview and he does not see the menace of Brian James. He understands Brian James's resistance to the questions.
Now, in the original cut of the film,
that's my opinion.
No. Listen, that is an excellent perspective, and it's not something I ever thought about.
Well, I always surprise you.
Yes, you definitely always surprise me, and I'm a happy person for it. That's what makes you interesting. But in the original dialogue, Emmett Walsh, he says that 6 skin jobs escaped.
Right.
So 4 of them, you got Roy Baty, you got Priss, you got Zhora, and you got Leon. Who were the other 2?
Right. Well, he says in the extended edition that they got burnt in the electric fields or
One
whatever.
Of them got burned in the electric field, but until the voiceover was changed for the final cut.
Oh, interesting, because that would be Rachael and Deckard. Oh, son of a bitch.
Okay, but now you could argue that well, he fixed the dialogue.
But that doesn't make sense.
But
that doesn't make sense because he would remember if he had escaped.
But he is a replicant. He is programmed.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. So maybe his programming was adjusted, and now they're using a replicant to hunt down the other replicants because, again, the Blade Runner in this film is Gaff.
Here's why this isn't true, and I'm not trying to, because for at least
I
for
will
one of
prove
them,
you wrong, sir.
At least for one of them, they had cast the 5th replicant, who's a woman.
Okay.
They had written the scenes, and they ran out of money and didn't do it. So so it can't be Rachael.
Okay,
or at least one of those 2 cannot be one of these 6.
that's fair.
But I'm just going to pose this question again, and I will revisit at the end of this broadcast.
Yeah.
Why is it that every single time Deckard gets rid of one of the replicants, whether it's he actually kills him or someone else kills one of the replicants, like when Leon got shot in the head, Gaff is there. He's always there right afterwards. The cavalry shows up after the fact.
How close after?
Very close after.
How do you know?
Because you're watching the film.
You see him.
You're watching the film. Like after Zhora dies, Gaff shows up.
Yes.
How long does it take before Gaff shows up?
Gaff shows up right there. Yeah. Like, he goes after Zhora dies, Deckard goes to get a drink.
Yes.
He goes, is this okay? He goes, yeah, I'll take it. And then Gaff walks up right behind him and hits him with the hammer.
Yep.
That's true. You're right.
After Leon dies. Well, no, after Leon dies.
Well, Gaff was just there right before Leon dies. Right before Leon. Gaff has just been there.
Right.
Then,
Gaff was there with Emmett Walsh.
Right.
Okay. So then,
because he says there's 4. Because by this point he realizes Rachael is a replicant, and he says there's 4. And he's no, there's 3.
And then, even after Baty dies, at the end of the film, there's the spinner.
He's right there.
Shows up. He's right there.
Interesting.
He's right there, and Gaff says, "You've done a man's job, sir. I guess you're through, huh?" And he goes, "Finish." And that's when the whole, it's too bad she won't live. But right after that massive fight with Baty, and he is beaten, bleeding, and exhausted, the spinner rises, and he gets out and says, "You've done a man's job because you are not a man. You are a replicant."
Interesting. Well, that's certainly evidence that
is the Blade Runner.
Well, that's certainly evidence that he's a replicant.
Yeah.
And if you disagree with me, hit me up on Twitter at MovieMans and tell me that I am full of shit.
All right,
you are wrong.
So we're heading off.
Okay. Now during the briefing where Deckard is introduced to each of the 4 replicants, you're seeing the interview with Leon.
Yeah.
Then you see Zhora. I love Emmett Walsh's line. He goes,
Talk about Beauty and the Beast. She's both.
Then you meet Priss, a pleasure skin job,
right?
And then I think the last one is Baty, right?
Yeah,
is the last one Baty?
The score kicks in when he shows up.
He goes, there's a replicant at Tyrell Corporation. Why don't you use the Roy Comp machine, test it out, make sure it works? And he goes, and what if it doesn't work? And he just kind of looks at him. So then, so the next scene is Deckard is going to Tyrell.
Yeah.
Beautiful design of the exterior of that building. Unbelievable.
And the interior.
Yes.
Oh, gorgeous.
The reveal when the spinner lands. The inside of Tyrell's office.
Yeah.
This huge, massive office. The cinematography, the lighting of that scene is one of the most beautifully lit scenes I have ever seen.
Yeah.
And it starts off with the owl flying across the room.
Right.
And the sun is coming through the window. And the sunset is very, very red because of all the pollution in the air. And the score kicks in.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful score. Do you like our owl? And we're introduced to Rachael.
Now, I want to say something real quick. To me, what's so interesting about this whole sequence is it's very Egyptian.
Absolutely.
It evokes Egyptian feeling, right? The building on the outside feels like a pyramid. On the inside, it feels like those old school Egyptian throne rooms with the owl, which is a symbol of the Egyptian times as well. And the long table, all of it, and the sunlight. And when the sunlight, when they put the shades down before they do the test.
And you know, you have the sunlight shining off the water, and the water is, the light from the water is going against the wall.
Yeah.
Like, God only knows how long it took for them to light that scene. Yeah. But
couple of things I just want to jump in real fast about it being Egyptian. First thing is, Egyptian is very Art Deco because Art Deco is strongly influenced by the opening of Tutankhamun's tomb.
Oh, wow.
And that's what a lot of those, if you look at Art Deco stuff, a lot of it comes from that Egyptian fad. The other interesting thing about it is originally, and they didn't shoot this, they was going to have Tyrell is dead, and that is also a replicant, and he is living in his body is in a sarcophagus underneath that thing. So the whole pyramid thing makes perfect sense, and then they kind of dump that, which I think is good, by the way.
Yeah, Tyrell was a replicant.
It's only, to me, it's like there's only so many times you can play this replicant card,
right?
You know what I mean? It's like good not to have so many of them.
Well, yeah, and now what you said, we're introduced to Rachael. This is Sean Young is absolutely beautiful in this movie. Gorgeous in so many ways, not just physically. Her character, the vulnerability of her character, yet the steel, the combination of both. It makes you like it's this fantasy woman. It really is, because Deckard falls in love with her in literally like 45 minutes. Like it's literally no time at all, because she is this unattainable, unblemished beauty. And so he can transpose his ideas, his thoughts on her, his ideas of this romanticism, right? And she is so like just powerful in her presence, but not inaccessible. And I think that's what's so amazing. Unavailable versus inaccessible. These are two different things. And so I love the way she comes in and commands the stage and says to him, like, and she even has a smirk when he says he's going to try. He's like, not me, try it on her. And she goes,
yeah, she smirks.
She smirks because she thinks she's human.
Yeah, but the way she sort of challenges him, she says,
"May I ask you a personal question?"
Sure.
Have you ever retired a human by mistake?
No.
But in your position, that is a risk.
And then Tyrell comes in.
Yeah.
Is this to be an empathy test? Capillary dilation of the so-called blush response? Fluctuation of the pupil? Involuntary dilation of the iris?
We call it void comp for short.
Mr. Deckard, Dr. Eldon Tyrell.
And the whole back and forth, I want to see work on a person. I want to see a negative before I provide you with a positive on you. And he goes, try her.
Yeah. And she has the
It's
spark.
too bright in here.
It's perfect.
And there's a great sense of like that she's up to the challenge.
Yes.
She's like, there's no, because if someone wanted to do some crazy weird test on me, I would still be nervous. She's not nervous. Nope. She's actually enjoying it.
It's your birthday. Someone gives you a calfskin wallet.
I wouldn't accept it. Also, I'd report the person who gave it to me to the police.
You've got a little boy. He shows you his butterfly collection, plus the killing jar.
I take him to the doctor.
You're watching television. Suddenly you realize there's a wasp crawling on your arm.
I'd kill it.
You're reading a magazine. You come across a full-page nude photo of a girl.
Is this testing whether I'm a replicant or a lesbian, Mr. Deckard?
Just answer the questions, please.
She gets impatient with him. Like, is this the testing to see whether I'm a replicant or a lesbian, Mr. Deckard?
And of course, we go through the test, and he comes up to Tyrell after, who is Joe Turkel, by the way, that we saw in The Shining. And says she's a replicant.
She's a replicant, isn't she?
I'm impressed.
How many questions does it usually take to spot one?
I don't get it, Tyrell.
How many questions?
20, 30 cross-referenced.
It took more than 100 for Rachael, didn't it?
She doesn't know.
She's beginning to suspect, I think.
Suspect? How can it not know what it is?
Which again is the symbolism. How can it not know what it is? We are always searching for who we are. What's our destiny? Where do we belong? What are we? And other people from the outside sometimes can see us better than we see ourselves because we're too close.
You give them the memories.
Yes.
She had the memories that were implanted.
We began to recognize in them a strange obsession. After all, they are emotionally inexperienced with only a few years in which to store up the experiences which you and I take for granted. If we gift them with the past, we create a cushion or pillow for their emotions, and consequently we can control them better.
Memories. You're talking about memories.
And that's how Deckard knew about them when Rachael went to his place.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, basically facing her quote-unquote mortality by realizing that she is a replicant. She probably only has like 4 years.
Well, and this gets into what is really good sci-fi, which is, what does it mean to be human?
Yeah.
What do our memories mean? What is consciousness? What is the value of human life? And at what point do we value it? Because at the beginning of this movie, our setup is these aren't humans.
Right.
And at this moment, how does it not know what it is?
Right.
That's saying it's still not human, even though it thinks it's human. And if we go to, Descartes, I think, therefore I am. That is we don't have really a good definition of consciousness, but that's probably the one that goes around the most. Mm-hmm. And these characters clearly think at this moment. Mm-hmm. It took over 100 questions to answer it. It does not know what it is. It's clearly thinking. Right. So it's passing the Cartesian test, but it's not passing Deckard's test or the tests of this society at this moment.
And that's great you bring that up, Steve, because Priss says that near the end of the film. I think, therefore I am. She says it to Sebastian or to Sebastian.
JF Sebastian.
To JF. And so like that's all there. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
one quick thing I want to say just about costumes, which is this movie is so influential, is that Sean Young comes out in these 40s big shoulder pad outfits.
Yes, once again.
What do we see 4 or 5 years later in the 80s in women's fashion?
Right. Shoulder pads.
Big, huge shoulder pads. Now, I'm not saying that I know that comes from Blade Runner. Right. But it's in Blade Runner.
But maybe it did.
Yeah.
And it's also evocative of noir. This is what we have noir films. And also her hairstyle is very 40s.
Well, and one of the things that I know that Ridley Scott talked about is that fashion is cyclical. And we know this because we saw the 70s come back in the 90s and we see the 60s come back in the 80s. And so he's looking at things and going, the 40s are back. And that's part of what's happening within this film. So this is a detective story. And so we go off, we have that key piece of information we get in the interview, which is the address. And we go back to where Leon lived. And by the way, this is shot as a pickup. That's not Harrison Ford's arm reaching into that bathtub. It is, in fact, Morgan Paul, our guy who kind of looks like Harrison Ford, who is our guy who was doing the interview at the beginning of the movie.
Yes. And the name of the place is the Yukon, right? Isn't that the name of the place they go to?
I think
hotel?
So. The place he stays. Yeah.
Okay, I looked this up, the symbolism of a Yukon. It holds the earliest evidence of the presence of human occupation in North America. And I thought this was a perfect thing to use because it is this idea of human occupation, this idea of the replicants are the first generation of this type of human cyborg, whatever you want to call it, And in fact, even the opening scroll, which we haven't talked about yet, I love that replicant is in red. I love that idea because in most of the study Bibles, Jesus Christ's words are in red, and this idea of sacrifice for the greater, sacrifice for the better. So there's so much about here that could be read into it, and maybe I'm way off base and really laugh at me right now. But like this idea of the Yukon makes sense to me as well to call it that. This idea of the beginning, this first creation of the first generation. So
love it.
Yeah.
So we're at Leon's apartment, and Leon was going to go back there because he wanted to get his precious photos.
Right. Yeah.
And we get the snake scale from the bathtub.
Yes.
Yep.
And we also see the second time that Gaff does an origami.
Right.
Yep. And this becomes a key thing, these origami. Beautiful character point, and it's going to be a plant and a payoff.
The dude with a large penis.
Yes.
And the first time it's a chicken because Deckard is initially refusing to do it, which is why he does the chicken. The second is large penis because Deckard is, he's becoming this, he's embracing this idea of going after it. Yeah.
I never thought about that. That's
really?
Great. No, I never thought of that. That's awesome.
Okay.
So we're gonna go. Leon goes and meets Roy. Mm-hmm. We meet Rutger Hauer for the first time.
Oh, time enough. You see the hand. You see the hand clenching because he's dying.
Yes.
Because that's what happens at the end of the film. He pushes the nail through his hand to keep it alive. Yeah. But he's in the phone booth, and his hand clenches like time enough. Like this is it. He's on his last. Yeah. He's on his last breath. Yeah. Gets out, says to Len, "Did you get your photos?" And he goes, "No, someone was there. Was it a man? A man?" And he shakes his head and he goes, "Police man." And then they walk off, and it's again beautiful. It's shot. You have the glowing graffiti of the Japanese, and the cans on fire, and the bikers go by,
right?
And they go to I Just Do Eyes.
Morphology, longevity, incept dates.
Don't know. I don't know such stuff. I just do eyes. Just eyes. Genetic design. Just eyes. You Nexus, huh? I design your eyes.
James Hong.
I Just Do Eyes.
I love him. And I can't stop. It's like Big Trouble in Little China is such a big movie for me, and he is so great, and he's just one of these great iconic actors that you see in all sorts of movies you love. He's great in this scene.
And he looks the same age. And he's like Max von Sydow. He has been 70 years old since the first time I've seen him.
Yeah, he
until
always
now.
looked old. It's like Steve Martin. Steve Martin has always looked like an old man.
That's right.
Yeah, and this was really shot in a cold storage place.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It is really cold. They had major problems with lights. The lights were smoking. The actors couldn't breathe. And again, Ridley, not nice to his actors. He doesn't really care. It was a pretty brutal shoot, but the scene is great. And you know, Roy is a great bad guy.
Questions. I don't know answers.
Who does?
Tyrell.
Yes,
it's one of the great bad guys, and definitely the best character that Rutger Hauer has ever played.
Absolutely, and
better than Blind Fury.
Better than Blind Fury.
What?
Yes.
Okay. He's not necessarily a bad guy. He's trying to live. He's trying to figure out how to live. To him, but when he kills Tyrell, that's you can see what feeling you feel about that. But he's trying to find out. They used them as slaves. They created them to be slaves, right? He says this at the end of the film: "Live in fear. This is what it's like to be a slave." You know, and so I don't see him necessarily as a bad guy. When I was younger, absolutely, but as I'm older now, I see what he's trying to do. I understand his logic. Is he doing it the right way? No, because he's torturing people. He's hurting people. What he does to James Hong in that scene makes him freeze to death to give him the information. So because he doesn't have time to be nice or to take his like he has to be ruthless.
By the way, I couldn't agree more. And as soon as I said bad guy, I didn't like the fact that I said it. And slight spoiler alert: I have my own theory that we're going to get to at the end of this film.
Oh, well, let's get to it.
So we get a little bit more information. We find out about this name, J.F. Sebastian. Yeah, that's the guy to get to Tyrell. Mm-hmm. And then we go back to Deckard, who goes home to his fascinatingly designed apartment.
Yes, and very tall. Number 97. He's on the 97th
floor. And goes in, and who's waiting for him in his apartment but Rachael?
Who's waiting for him in the elevator?
Yeah.
Is Rachael. And
he pulls the door closes, he takes out his blaster. Yeah. And, and then listen, she's now on to the fact that she's a replicant.
You think I'm a replicant, don't you?
Remember when you were 6? You and your brother snuck into an empty building through a basement window. You were going to play doctor. He showed you his. And when it got to be your turn, you chickened and ran. Remember that? You ever tell anybody that? Your mother, Tyrell, anybody? Huh? You remember the spider that lived in a bush outside your window? Orange body, green legs. Watched her build a web all summer. Then one day there's a big egg in it. The egg hatched.
The egg hatched?
And
100 baby spiders came out. And they ate her.
Implants. Those aren't your memories. They're somebody else's. They're Tyrell's nieces.
And he's like being totally insensitive, and
it is so horrible what he does to her in this moment.
He's very callous.
It is completely unfeeling. Which part of me, by the way, goes maybe, and that's evidence that he's a replicant.
Well, Maybe
no human empathy here at all.
No, but it's very evocative of noir stuff. Humphrey Bogart is very callous in all the films he's in, right? With all the women that he interacts with, and later on he physically pushes her against the wall, which we'll get to that scene at some point. But like this is his approach. This is a very noir approach to the situation. It's unknowingly callous. He isn't malicious on purpose. He catches himself when he realizes what he says, and she storms out, and that's why he calls her from the bar when he goes to see Zhora. He's trying to apologize in his ham-handed way.
It's not my kind of place,
right? And she's trying. She lets him in a little bit, and but he's very callous. You're right.
It's brutal.
But then he shows remorse. He's like, you want a drink, and he goes to get her a drink, and she's, but when he comes back, she's out the door.
Yeah.
So and while all this is going on, the back and forth between Deckard and Rachael, you hear Rachel's theme for the first time.
Yes,
Rachel's theme, the beautiful score, and it's something that happens later in the film. That beautiful piano score, it's just so gorgeous. And then listen, now we finally meet Priss and J.F. Sebastian.
Right.
It's a great intro. Yeah.
Right outside the Bradbury Building, which is a Los Angeles landmark.
Yeah.
And when I first moved to LA, one of the first things I did was I got to see the Bradbury Building at 3rd and Broadway downtown. And you walk in that building and it looks just like Blade Runner. It's still.
I disagree. I think it's gorgeous, and I think you should visit it and go walk in and look. But it looks amazing, but it is beautiful and pristine and clean. So it doesn't look like Blade Runner to me. I know that it's the same building because the way that Blade Runner is dressed is so gritty and dark and wet and messy and grungy and old, and the Bradbury Building is beautifully preserved.
But if you take away the rain, if you take away the moody lighting, then that's the Bradbury Building. Yeah. Sure. It doesn't look like, even with all that lighting to accentuate the scene, like you talk about the backlots of Warner Brothers, how you look at the backlot now, you're like, oh, there's like, I can't believe they shot Blade Runner here. Right. But as soon as you walk into the Bradbury Building,
totally true.
It looks just like it. Well, not just like it, but enough like it because they didn't have to do much to change the look of the building.
The actual architecture, it's remarkable architecture. Yeah. It's kind of an anomaly architecturally, is my understanding. It doesn't look like any other building in Los Angeles. It's very much its own thing, built by an architect that didn't do a lot of other stuff. Right. And one thing that I just found out is that people were working in the building when they were shooting, and so every single night, they shot all nights, they had to clean everything out and make it perfect so people could come and work and redress so then they start shooting. I don't know how you could possibly
they
do
shot
that.
At night. They would put the water everywhere and the lighting and then have everything like brand spanking new in time for the next morning when people would come in to go to work. How awesome would that be to go to work at the Bradbury Building? Yeah. That would be awesome.
So then what happens next? Now we
we have Daryl Hannah and J.F. Sebastian, William Sanderson. Right. Their relationship is really kind of sweet and lovely, and we get some.
She's using him.
Right.
She is using him.
She is, and she's
no question about it.
When they meet outside, he's like, "Sano, you want to come in?"
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, I don't have any place to go. Whatever. I'm really hungry." And he goes, "Oh, you want to come up?" And when Sebastian turns her back on Priss to sort of lead the way, the look that Priss gives him, she is using him.
Yep.
She's taking advantage of it.
It's true. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, one of my questions is at what point does J.F. Sebastian recognize that these are Nexus 6 or that these are
when
replicants?
Batty shows up.
When Batty shows
when
up.
Batty shows up. But when they go up to Sebastian's apartment, she is playing into him because, she's very pretty, she's young, and they go up to his apartment and you realize that he's like this lonely guy who lives with his toys. Good evening, JF. Home again, jiggity jig. And then all the, real actors.
Yeah.
Real actors, not animatronics, not special effects, real actors, little people made up to walk around like they're toys or mannequins. Some of them are mannequins, but it's again, all the lighting in Sebastian's apartment is gorgeous.
Gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. Yep. We have a unicorn dream, depending on what version you watch.
Yes.
Now we're talking about the final cut, and the final cut version of the unicorn dream. The Unicorn Dream is a little longer than it was in the director's cut.
Right.
So this is the scene that firmly establishes more than any other scene in the film because of the way it ties to the end, that Deckard is a replicant. Now, you have Deckard hunched over the piano, playing the piano, just sort of out of it, having a daydream. And then you hear the music swells, and you see the unicorn. And in the final cut, there's a close-up of Harrison Ford where he's just kind of like out of it, like not completely, like there's a glitch in it. Okay, now has a dream of a unicorn. The last origami.
Yes.
That's outside of his apartment.
Yes.
When he escapes with Rachael.
Yes.
Is a unicorn.
The silver unicorn, yes.
So, how did Gaff know what Deckard was dreaming? Because the dream is on file, because he is a replicant.
Damn.
Because Gaff is the Blade Runner of this story.
Here, son of a bitch.
Well,
this is great.
First of all, there's no question that the unicorn is evidence, or is used as evidence that he's a replicant.
Right.
Whether or not that means Gaff is the Blade Runner, I don't know. Clearly, Gaff is on the job.
He's the Blade Runner.
Because he could have left the unicorn there in a symbol of Rachael. Because in a way, when he says it's a shame she won't live, he remembers that in that moment. It's Gaff letting her live. He could have taken her out. He has every right to take Rachael out.
She won't live.
Right. It's too bad she won't live, but then again, who does? Which is great.
And by the way, clearly he's not a very good Blade Runner. If the definition of a Blade Runner is someone who kills replicants, his main action is to not kill anybody.
But that's because he was letting the replicant do his dirty work for him.
Yep.
And
yes,
he
but
lets him
these
live.
last two,
he lets him live because he's done a man's job.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm fine with it. One thing I want to bring up, because we're talking about this unicorn thing, is, and this is what we can't know, is that's very thin storytelling. That is the main evidence of Deckard being a replicant. He has a dream about a unicorn. At the end of the movie, someone makes a unicorn. And what I really wonder, because when I went to see the director's cut, I had heard articles in Entertainment Weekly or whatever, in this version Deckard's a replicant. So I had already seen the movie over and over again. So I can't see that movie in fresh eyes and go, is the storytelling clear enough that would 100% of the audience walk out of that go, hey, that guy's a replicant because of the unicorn thing? I don't think so.
No, I think
that's very thin, and it's not a criticism. It's just, sometimes when you're making a film, there are some things you absolutely need 100% of the audience to understand the film. And there are other things where 80% of the audience understands, and there's some things where maybe 20% of the audience goes, I think that he's actually a replicant because did you notice that? And then people start talking and that's okay. And to me, this seems like something that's on a pretty low percentage of if people knew nothing about the film before they saw it. Like what percentage of people would actually walk out right after it and go, he's a replicant,
But you see, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah,
the
it's not a criticism.
That it was, that even after the director's cut came out and the dream sequence was included, I still think that it's a great thing that when it's so subtle that people pick up on it and that it goes, even the 1992 version of going viral, which meant that it was just like in magazines and stuff like that.
Because I remember a friend of mine handed me an article or something, this was before the internet. It's exactly what it did. It went 1992 viral. And went, oh shit.
But you see, and that's the beauty of it, that even when the final cut came out in 2007, I interviewed Ridley Scott. And definitely it was a bucket list interview because it was for Blade Runner.
Wow.
And he had to put his leg up on a chair and put ice on it because he sprained his ankle playing tennis. That's what I remember about it. But he was super, super nice. So we're talking about the film. So I asked him point blank, all right, yes or no, is Deckard a replicant? He goes, what do you think? I said, yes, he is. He goes, why do you think that? And I said, well, the dream sequence, the unicorn, the origami of the unicorn, he has to be a replicant. He goes, you're right.
Well, there you go.
He said, you're right. Now, what I didn't ask him was if Gaff was the real Blade Runner, but I wish I did.
Next time,
when you do the interview with him after the super final, this is really the last time cut. Then you can ask that
final cut.
Okay, so now we have a scene that just stuck with me forever, which is, enhance section 307.
Yeah.
I love this. I mean, this is such a geeky thing. And of course, we live in the world where we're doing that by spreading our pinching and zooming now.
It is forensics by way of Google Maps.
Yeah.
It's you're right. I didn't equate it with like, spreading the thing on your phone and but that's what it is. It's you're doing forensic evidence just through pictures, zoom, no, pull back, go to the right, 336, stop, zoom in there, pull back, 386. I mean, it's like,
it's
what?
so cool. Yeah. And it's funny. I remember one of the things you have to do when you're doing science fiction is you have to imagine the future.
Yeah.
So you have to try to figure out what is science going to come up with? How is the world going to work? And there's a great quote I always love from Walt Disney, which is what they're making Disneyland. And he says, really, we should call Tomorrowland Yesterdayland. Because whatever we imagine as the future is always the 1967 version of the future. It actually becomes the past really fast. And this is one I was thinking about. I was like, this is 1982. No one's seen a mouse, or almost no one has seen a mouse on a computer. And here we are in 2017, and we're 2 years before this movie is supposed to take place. And what's our new technology we're using all the time? Voice recognition.
Yeah.
Right? We're Siri. Actually going into Siri and Alexa and all those things.
Even FaceTiming. We're doing now as when he calls Rachael from the bar. That's that's essentially FaceTiming.
Yeah. Star Trek did that in 1966.
Yes, right.
We also take a look. He's got this scale. He takes this scale down to this woman in this great scene to try to figure out who made this scale. Is it a fish? No, snake.
All right.
And that leads us off to the snake guy, and that leads us off to Zhora.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you're the scene in the market. This is downtown LA.
Yeah.
It is called Anemoid Row. Because in the beginning of the film, or when he meets Rachael, when Deckard meets Rachael, the owl is not real.
Right.
So even though this was not established in the narrative of the film, when Deckard is going around the market, he's looking for the vendor who designed the snake. The snake isn't real either. You think I could afford a real snake?
Yeah.
And you see the ostrich walk by him. These are all anemoids. They're all animal versions of replicants.
Right.
I don't know why. Maybe global warming? Who the hell knows?
Right.
It's raining in Los Angeles. Now, it rained a lot this year in Los Angeles, but normally it never rains here. And you're watching a film about the future of LA where it rains all the time.
Yeah.
Well, this is also, it's a weird noir thing because in classic noir, most of which is in LA, people are always in these trench coats.
Yeah.
It's always like, nobody's wearing short sleeve shirts in the sun. Yeah, like the vision of what noir LA is not what I'm seeing out the window right now.
Well, this whole bar sequence is so great. The whole scene. And once again, it's him trying to apologize to Rachael. That weird guy is like, he looks a little thirsty, give him some on the house. All that's very noirish. And then the stuff with Rachael. And then he plays this character trying to get through Zora's defenses, right?
Excuse me, Miss Salome. Can I talk to you for a minute? I'm from the American Federation of Variety Artists.
Oh, yeah?
I'm not here to make you join. No, ma'am. That's not my department. Actually, I'm from the Confidential Committee on Moral Abuses.
He ends up in her dressing room, and his voice changes. Like initially he's like, hey, I'm from the Association, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually he does this blinking thing where his voice comes back to normal. And then Joanna Cassidy, great Joanna Cassidy, she does this whole sequence, does the shower, her hair into the, all of that is just, and the music is hitting, the synthesizer music is hitting. And then she comes out and puts on this like almost futuristic Barbarella type top with the plastic jacket and hits him in the ribs and whatever.
She's onto him.
When is she onto him is my sequence, and I watched it twice or three times this scene today. When is she onto him? Because you never see her go, wait a minute, there's not a moment.
There actually is a quick moment.
There is? Okay.
There's a quick moment. Like, when he goes, he's on from the Committee of Moral Abuses. Moral abuses? Have you ever felt yourself to be taken advantage of in any way? He's like having this dialogue with her, and she's answering his questions thinking because he changed his voice, he sounds like an idiot.
Right.
But then, he says, like, you ever had a problem with, like, holes? He goes, holes? And this is after she's blow drying her hair, and she's starting to get dressed, and she's, like, drying herself off. You see her, like sort of take a look back at him. Like she doesn't turn around and face him, but something is wrong.
Right.
Like she gets that something is wrong, and then she hits him in the face and starts choking him with his tie.
Right.
And then she gets out of there and he goes after her.
She gets disrupted.
All the when they're running down the street, when they're running down and all the crowds and the crowds of misfits, and they're all dressed so differently, and the chaos, and there's no music during this moment because all you're hearing are the people and the cross now, cross now, cross now, and he can't really fire her without hitting someone else until he finally gets to a point where he's got her in his sights. He's like, move, get out of the way, and she's running away, and he's finally, because this is the first time that he really on his own kills a replicant.
Yes,
because like that was really the moment when she was running through and he hits her and she's running through the glass, and then she dies, and it's a great scene.
Yeah, it's a great winter scene too, almost because of the sequences that are happening here, right? It was to me, it evoked the Oranishi scene in Kill Bill when they have that fight, and after she strikes that last blow, the bride does her slow descent onto the floor. It's very reminiscent of that because it's done in slow motion, obviously, in Blade Runner. But once again, it's this idea of this coldness, this kind of this aloof, this distance, and you see it happening here in the death scene. So, and then he has the sequence, he has this. I'm Deckard, I'm a Blade Runner, and we see Leon watching this whole thing. So we see Leon watching Priss get killed by Deckard, right?
It's Zhora.
Zhora get killed by Deckard.
So Joanna Cassidy,
but Leon is watching.
Now, in the original cut and the director's cut, the scene was shot with a stunt woman. And when the stunt woman is running through and gets shot and breaks through the glass, it is obviously a woman in a wig. It is obviously a stunt person. So for the final cut in 2007, they went back, reshot the scene.
What?
They reshot the scene with Joanna Cassidy.
What?
For the 2007 final cut version of Blade Runner, they recreated the entire scene with the glass and the lighting. And so Joanna Cassidy, who looked amazing. I mean, they touched it up with a little CGI on the face because she does look a little older. But compare the director's cut with the final cut.
That's amazing.
Watch both of those scenes. Okay. And when I saw it in the theater, people were cheering and clapping because the shot matched perfectly, because it was clearly Joanna Cassidy, the one that was really her going through the glass, dying.
That was a forgiveness I always made about the film. I could tell it's a stunt person. I don't care. It's still a good
the final cut now.
I will.
That
I have
Joanna
the
Cassidy.
Blu-ray disc thing that came out, so I will have
nice,
it.
Watch that. And so at this moment, this is the moment I think where the film shows how unique it is, which is we've had our hero ostensibly kill one of the people he's been after, and you don't feel good. It is a sad, hard, confusing emotionally moment. It's fraught with a lot of stuff.
Why?
Because Zhora didn't do anything. Zhora hasn't done anything but dance.
She's a replicant.
Right.
She's a killer. So why is Deckard showing remorse over having just killed a replicant?
You're saying because he's a replicant?
He is a replicant.
You can't think of any other reason why one might show remorse about shooting someone in the back?
In this case, he was doing his job.
Yeah.
He was doing his job. But why is he showing?
You can't think of any reason why somebody who was doing their job that involved a horrible thing might feel remorse over that?
But he wasn't showing remorse at all with really anybody up to this point. So why is he showing remorse over somebody that he was assigned to kill, someone he did not know? Because he's a replicant.
So your only reason that someone might feel remorse for someone else is that they're of the same
species?
He's
not saying someone. He's saying Deckard.
I think that I don't think that's...
Okay, what's your theory?
What's my theory?
What's your thought?
Why is he showing remorse in this scene?
Why is Deckard showing remorse?
Why is he standing over her? So why does he feel bad? And in a sense, why does the audience feel bad?
Well, because they're humans.
Who's human? Who's human?
Deckard? I don't buy that.
Because they have souls, because they look like humans, because they have thoughts, emotions, and feelings. I mean, that's what this whole movie's about, is what is the identity of these characters? Are they machines that have no value?
This is such a cold
character. Do
character.
they have life value?
Deckard is such a cold, emotionless character.
Agree.
Okay.
Well,
and this is the first time he has had to. This is the first one of only two times where he actually was the one who killed a replicant, because the other two died by different means.
Yeah.
Right.
One Rachael shot, and then Baty just died on his own accord.
Right.
But he didn't know Zhora.
Yeah.
He didn't have time to get to know her,
right.
to feel bad because he killed her. He felt bad because he is a replicant, because
that's certainly possible.
He is not the Blade Runner.
I think both your theories are possible. It could be feel bad because it's a human situation and emotions and killing, but it could also be because he's a replicant and killing her. And the first time he kills the actual replicant, there's a new feeling inside him that he can't quite process.
Let me ask you this question: Do you think that killing the replicants is a cool thing to do?
Well, knowing what I know about the replicants, knowing how they were. They because they were conscious and they were aware of their mortality and they had memories, whether they were implanted or not, and they were implanted, they were human. I know that because I've seen the movie 100 times.
Well, and so maybe if you first discover this by meeting Rachael, and then you do feel some remorse for being mean to her, which he is, and then you have a couple of other experiences, you don't think that's enough of a reason for a human to maybe start to feel remorse?
Possibly. Why are you trying to die on this mountain? I don't understand. Both your theories can work.
Well,
you're trying to make him. You're trying to convince him.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying that in itself is not great evidence for him being a replicant, because there's a perfectly human explanation for why someone might feel remorse.
Well, again, in any other film, in any other story, yeah, absolutely. Some
I mean,
people.
He is a replicant. Based on I think the movie pushes it that way.
And by the way, we'll find out if he's a replicant for sure in Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah.
October 6th.
Well, he's still alive.
Yeah,
so
he's
maybe
still
he
alive.
isn't.
4-year lifespan.
I think that Harrison Ford is one of the greatest actors, has the greatest getting beat up skill of any actor I can think of.
Absolutely.
He knows how to get his ass kicked. Mm-hmm. And he gets his ass kicked repeatedly, particularly as Indiana Jones. But man, him get beat up by Leon, brutal.
The slow slaps are fantastic. But once again, it's what you do to someone who is lesser than you. For lack of a better phrase, treating someone like a bitch. And that's what he does. He goes,
that scene with Leon is so good.
My birthday is April 10, 2017. How long do I live? 4 years.
And he goes, wake up, time to die.
It's so great.
It's such a great scene.
Yeah, and he's rescued by Rachael.
Yes.
Rachael shoots Leon in the head.
So,
which means she had second thoughts about coming down to meet him, because she's there in that area right there. I think she's coming to meet him at the bar, or she's coming to meet. She follows him to that sequence.
It's the only reason that she could be there. Yeah. We go back to the apartment. I love the blood in the shot.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
let's
great.
talk about that scene. Okay. So they're back in Deckard's apartment after, like I said, Deckard got the crap kicked out of him. Yeah. So he takes a little swig from the shot glass, and the blood.
Great.
Yeah, the suck back goes back into the glass, and you see the blood in there. And Rachael.
It's Harrison Ford's idea, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
that's
Harrison
great.
Ford, right. Yeah. So, but Rachael is standing there, and he goes,
Shakes? Me too. I get them bad. It's part of the business.
I'm not in the business. I am the business.
Yeah, that's so great.
Line. Fantastic.
Great line. And so, all right, guys, this is
Scott Mantz
stood up.
1 hour.
He's pacing
We
back
are
and
now past the halfway point of Blade Runner.
Yeah, we only have.
We are past the midpoint of this film when Leon gets shot in the head. We talked about how Blade Runner, maybe the Blade Runner is not Deckard. Maybe the Blade Runner is Gaff. We talked about, the unicorn establishes that he is probably a replicant. We have talked about why does he show remorse standing over Zhora's body. Exhibit C in the case for Rick Deckard being a replicant is this. So Deckard takes off his shirt, puts his head in the sink, in the ice. He's rinsing out his mouth, and the blood is dripping out of his mouth. Rachael says to him, what if I go north? Will you come after me? Hunt me. So Deckard is drying off himself with a towel. He goes, no.
Right.
I owe you one. But then in the very next scene, Deckard says, but somebody would.
Yeah.
Now, at that moment, at 1 hour and 8 minutes into the film, when he says, but somebody would, okay, what is another sign that someone is a replicant? Their eyes glow. We saw the owl's eyes glow.
Good point, yeah.
Okay, we saw the owl's eyes glow. We saw Rachael's eyes glow when she was being interviewed for the Voight Comp test.
Oh, interesting.
And now, at 1 hour and 8 minutes into the film, when Deckard walks behind Rachael and says, "But somebody would," he's out of focus, but clearly you see his eyes are glowing.
Interesting.
Go home, put on your Blu-ray.
No, you're right.
1 hour and 8 minutes.
Great point.
Everybody listening, stop the podcast right now. Put on your Blu-ray. Advance to 1 hour and 8 minutes. In this scene, you will see Deckard's eyes glowing. He is a replicant. Okay. He is not the Blade Runner. Gaff is.
Okay. All right.
Great point.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Right. So we get into this love scene, which now part of this is my 2017 eyes looking at this thing. But and part of it is stories I've heard about behind the scenes of how this was shot. It's pretty rapey.
Oh. Okay.
It's pretty pushy.
Well, sure, it's pushy, but it's also noirish. This is how it was in the noir stuff. It evokes that noir feeling. He's a man. He's a little more of a brutish man. But when he pushes her, she is running. He is trying to make her face something. And she ran last time, and he's not going to let her run again.
She ran last time because he was horrible to her.
Well, sure, fair. But like he's trying to make her face this, right? And in this moment, he shuts the door like this.
What's he trying to make her face?
Well, before that, just to establish the fact that he's showing more remorse for her, and she's starting to feel for him after he's lying on the couch and he's got the drink on his chest. She starts playing the piano, and he sits next to her, and he goes, I dreamt music, and she's like, I thought I had lessons, maybe they're just memories, and he goes, you play beautifully.
Yeah.
And then the angry,
but she's running from her feelings for it. And he's not going to let her run from her feelings for him. And so she shuts the door. And you may not like it, but this happens. This has happened. I have had this experience. This happens. Sometimes you have a moment where you have to make someone face something, and you grab them, and they face it, and it's there. I'm not saying you need to physically abuse anybody, but man-women relations are not black and white. In no fucking way are they black and white. So there are moments where you have to do something. I'm sure in any relationship you've had moments you have to be, no, listen to me. There is a situation. So that happens. What he's saying to her in essence is, no, listen to me. He's
saying in essence is kiss me.
That's your opinion.
No, that's what happens in the scene.
No, but I'm saying what he's saying to her underneath the words.
Yeah, like figuratively. He's saying
figuratively, because when he pushes her against the wall, he realizes he's gone too far. Because he does. He puts his hands out in a way of like, I'm sorry.
He's like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, he puts his hands out in a way of I'm sorry, and then he approaches her slowly. He does it because he realizes he's pushed a bit too far, and he pulls back, and she lets him pull back, and that's the thing.
Kiss me.
They meet each other as equals in that moment, I think, because she was above him in the beginning, and she is slowly coming down, and he's coming up. And in that moment where they have the somewhat slight physical altercation, it is where there are equals. And he approaches her and he says, "Tell me to kiss me. Tell me to get." And she finally gives in and says, "Put your hands on my body." This is her giving in because she's been resisting for so long, and so
there's no question that is what happens in the scene. Two things I'll say about it. The first thing is that she is at her lowest emotional place. I have three things to say. Okay. One, she's at her lowest and most vulnerable place. Her whole life has been destroyed. Second thing is that she is literally has just discovered that she is of a species of servitude.
Sure.
And so that she is actually has no agency over her life.
Right.
And remember, when Deckard first met her, he called her an it. And the second time he met her, he treated her like an it. And what is this guy now doing? He's ordering her what to do.
He's also
Here's the third thing I'll say.
Okay, sure.
Here's the third thing I'll say.
Sure.
Ridley Scott told Harrison Ford to slam her against the wall. Didn't tell Sean Young.
Oh, that's not good.
She burst into tears and was crying.
Oh.
And Harrison Ford mooned her, ostensibly to make her laugh. Now, and this is the thing. It's like, is the film making the film? No. Does the scene work in the film? Yeah, it did.
Yes.
Did it bother me 10 years ago watching it? No. I did. I interpreted it just as you've interpreted. Now I have that story in my head, and that's a little bit in my head. And I also think about, that women actresses are frequently put in situations in Hollywood where they are pushed into doing things that they are uncomfortable with.
Absolutely.
And that is wrong. Now, does that have anything to do with Deckard and Rachael within the scene? Nothing whatsoever. But it did. But I did go like, watching it this time.
And that's a fair perspective to have. Absolutely, Steve, to put that in there.
2017.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But he's also, in another way, Steve, he keeps her from leaving because there's 2 crazy replicants out there, and she has just killed one of their friends.
Perfectly good point.
So that's another reason he kind of like wants to keep her there too, I would think.
All right. Roy goes and meets JF Sebastian.
Yes.
And there's this very odd in that relationship between Priss and JF and Roy.
JF knows instantly that he's in trouble too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, when Priss was there, Priss has this like innocence, even though she was using him.
Yeah.
But when Baty shows up, Sebastian gets scared.
Yeah.
Hi, Roy.
Gosh, you really got some nice toys here.
This is the friend I was telling you about. This is my savior, J.F. Sebastian.
Sebastian. I like a man that stays put. You live here all by yourself, do you?
Yes.
He gets scared.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The menace
You can tell that he is scared. And, Baty is just like, Zhora's gone, Lyanna's gone, and it's just us now. And they're trying to tell Sebastian to take me to your leader.
Right.
Is he good?
Who?
Your opponent.
Oh, Dr. Tyrell? I've only beaten him once in chess. He's a genius. He designed you.
Maybe he could help.
I'd be happy to mention it to him.
Better if I talk to him in person. But I understand he's a sort of hard man to get to.
Yes. Very.
Will you help us?
I can't.
We need you, Sebastian. You're our best and only friend.
They're trying to butter him up. He's, Baty's trying to make him laugh with like the eyes. We're so glad you found us.
Right.
And Sebastian is nervous, laughing. He's scared of Baty.
And fascinated too.
Yeah.
Like he's scared and fascinated, I think. And we're going, how are we going to get in to see Tyrell? And the answer is this chess game.
Yeah.
We show up at Tyrell's, wake him up, give him the chess move.
Of course, Tyrell thinks that Sebastian is by himself.
Right.
Because they're playing chess.
Right.
And he goes, "Oh, milk and cookies kept you awake, huh, Sebastian? Yeah, I think you better come up here." So he lets Sebastian in. Tyrell comes down in his bathrobe. And when he sees Sebastian and he sees Baty.
And Tyrell, of course, knows instantly.
Tyrell gets scared.
Right.
Like, oh, shit.
It's a great acting moment because he has a slight hesitation putting on the robe or wrapping the robe, tying the
He's
thing
tying the robe.
Then,
he looks down.
Yeah, and he looks down. And then he adjusts his tactics. And this is what he tries to do. And he tries to, in essence, he tries to kind of play the father to the situation and compliment him, thinking this is his way out.
Yeah. And then we have this beautiful confrontation between Tyrell and Roy, father and son.
It's disturbing.
Yeah.
It is unnerving.
It's not an easy thing to meet your maker.
And what can he do for you?
Can the maker repair what he makes?
Would you like to be modified?
Had in mind something a little more radical.
What seems to be the problem?
Death.
Death. Well, I'm afraid that's a little out of my jurisdiction.
I want more life, Father.
And he even calls him father.
Yeah, he calls,
insane.
And they get into a scientific discussion
of the possibilities of extending his
life. Can we do
life.
this? What about this? Well, no, because then this would get screwed up.
Right.
And he goes,
"You were made as well as we could make you.
But not to last.
The light that burns twice as bright burns half as long. And you have burned so very, very brightly, Roy. Look at you. You're the prodigal son. You're quite a prize.
I've done questionable things.
Also extraordinary things. Revel in your time.
Baty is accepting defeat, but not without consequence.
Right.
Kisses him, squeezes his head. And to this day, especially in the final cut, when Baty grabs Tyrell's head and squeezes it, and crushes his skull, puts his fingers in his eyes, and you see the blood spewing from his eyes in the final cut. I don't care how many times I watch that movie, I have to turn away. It is disturbing. The prodigal son returns to kill the father.
And the sounds that actor makes.
It's brutal.
It's very scary and sad.
He's crying out in pain. It's and the owl. It's just the mechanical owl just going back and forth. Great. No remorse whatsoever.
By the way, I do want to say one thing. What's so great about Tyrell, and I think it's a costume, those glasses make everything.
The glasses are great.
They're just the perfect.
Those glasses.
Sometimes it's just that one little extra thing, and it makes the whole character.
Particularly because his death is going to come through his eyes.
Yes, exactly.
And so we've been focusing on his glasses in this way.
Right.
Eyes. Just like going back to
James
Hong.
Eyes. It's all in the eyes.
And the very beginning of the movie.
Yes.
Right. The eye looking at you.
And the von Kampf test right on the eye.
Yep.
So, okay.
Yeah, they play a big part. Deckard shows up at JF's place. Yeah. And who does he run into but Priss?
It's a slow build. Deckard parks outside of the Bradbury, and, the music is just very, very calm. And as you see Deckard slowly making his way up the stairs to the Bradbury, watching his step, trying to keep an eye on everything. You see Priss, like her head moving back and forth in quick motions, and like her eyes roll back in her head. She knows he's coming. So he makes it to the top of the stairs. He gets in. He sees a couple of the toys. The room that Priss is in, covered with the veil. The lighting in that room is gorgeous. And you have one of the toys like laughing. And Deckard is just inching his way slowly but surely with his gun drawn, not knowing what is real and what is a toy. Not realizing there's a couple real life figures in the room, not realizing yet that one of them is Priss. But, she's covered and she's not moving. Nobody's moving. And the cinematography and then as he pulls the veil off and he's looking closer and closer into her eyes, and she just punches him. He goes flying across the room and he just, and then she jumps on him and puts her legs around his head and she's beating the shit out of him.
She's terrifying. And Daryl Hannah is great. By the way, she's the one who introduced the idea of gymnastics because she had done some gymnastics. That happened in the casting process. She said, what if she does like walkovers and things? But mostly that's not her doing all the big back handsprings. First there's a female stuntman, and then most of it's a guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it's a guy.
How do they tuck that thing in between? Because it
happens real fast. Well, if you look at it, you go like, there's a much thicker person doing some of this.
So she's doing all her somersaults and doing all her gymnastics, and Deckard just composes himself long enough to get a shot into her. And it is a loud shot, like the
it's
sound.
A big gun he's got.
Like it just goes right into her, like her stomach.
Yeah.
And she just she freaks out. She is like out of control. And it's disturbing to see her like that, just like lose all control like that.
It's very reminiscent of The Thing. In the sequence with where they hit where they're testing the blood and then they fall, and I think that's what she's doing. She's like screaming and sounding like an animal, like you're shooting an animal. Or if you've ever seen those videos of them shooting the cows or whatever, like it's scary, the sounds that come out of an animal when they're killing it. And so that is what this the high pitched squealing and the moving quickly. It gives you that feeling of a robot, of an android, of this kind of like Ash in Alien. It has that same kind of vibe, which makes sense for Ridley Scott.
That's a good point. And he too is an android.
Yeah.
And so he in the final cut he shoots her again and she's still writhing out of control.
Right.
And then he shoots her for a final time and she just dies.
Yeah. And again, similar to with Zhora's death, we the audience, we don't feel good about this. Like you don't go. I mean, I do more than Zhora's death because at least he's in combat. But when she's writhing on the ground in agony, I don't go good. I go ooh.
Okay,
it's disturbing.
I have a different reaction. I say good because she's been lying to Sebastian this whole time, and so to me, it's like You commit evil, this is your consequence. Like with Zhora, I absolutely agree. Zhora, I feel sadness when Zhora gets killed because Zora is just performing. For all we know, she has nothing to do with what Roy's doing. There is no scene between them where she's like, okay, I want you to do this because then eventually we're going to kill everyone. Like there's nothing of Zora's just performing. But with Priss is actively involved in this situation. And so when she gets killed, it's a horrible sound and it unsettles you to no end, but I also think it's a little more of an excusable death because of the evil intentions that she has had.
So at this point, Baty comes home.
Here comes Roy.
And he comes home to find Priss dead, and he touches her blood, puts the blood against his face, and he goes, Priss. He's the last one. Tyrell is dead. So this is his last shot. He's dying. This is it.
Yeah.
So he's going to go out in a blaze of glory. So he goes in, and Deckard is waiting for him. And he runs by at the end of the hall. Deckard fires. He misses.
Not very sporty to fire on an unarmed opponent.
Aren't you supposed to be a good man?
Good man?
Yeah. He goes, come on, Deckard. Show me what you're made of. Aren't you supposed to be a good man? Show me what you're made of. And then he breaks his fingers.
Yeah.
Brutal.
Yeah.
At this point, the taunting that Baty does with Deckard is the stuff of great cinema.
4, 5. How to stay alive.
Oh, yeah.
So quotable.
6, 7. Go to hell or go to heaven. That's the spirit.
And we see two things. One is we see the power and the scariness of Roy Baty.
Right.
And the other thing you see is the charisma and the genius of Rutger Hauer.
Yes.
Like his performance in this is one of those star-making performances.
Yeah.
Like this sequence, and there's something that's at once sort of primal and animalistic in the way he plays it. And there's also something spiritual and holy that he is experiencing the moment of his own death fully.
Yeah.
That's what we see.
Putting a nail through your palm.
Well, that's the thing. To me, there's Christ imagery.
That's definitely Christ-like.
especially because he strips down to basically what is a loincloth to fight him, right?
Yeah.
And he shoves that thing through his hand to be able to, and he saves his life when Deckard is about to slip off the beam. He saves his life.
But like the way he smashes, he says,
His head,
okay, I'm going to give you till 10. He's like, and he goes, 4, 5, time to stay alive.
Yeah.
And he's howling like a wounded animal.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, Deckard goes out on the ledge, and he goes, what are you doing? And he smashes him in the head with the toilet seat, and he goes, that hurt. I mean, it's funny, but it's disturbing too.
But he says that was unexpected. That's what he says. Yeah.
And there's this great moment where he's leaning out the window in the fire escape.
Yes.
And he stops, Deckard's gone, and he stopped just for a moment to feel the rain on his face. And there's this feeling of, this is the last time.
Yeah.
Savor this moment. Yeah. And there's oftentimes, in most movies, most action films or whatever, you're with the good guy.
Yeah.
And in this movie, we are split. Our allegiance is, we don't want Deckard to die.
Right.
But we don't want Roy to die either.
No,
right. And we love, you come to love him in this moment. And the choice to save him, here's a quick question. Was he thinking about killing him, or was he always going to save him?
Well, okay. So the way I feel like at the moment of his death is when Roy Baty became at his most human. He became human. He really became human at that moment. That, he was just going to, he definitely was toying with Deckard. He was going to kill Deckard.
Yeah.
But at the moment that his life was about to end, he realized how precious life really was.
Yeah. Right.
So when Deckard jumps across between the two buildings, and he doesn't jump far enough, and it's raining and he's slipping.
Quite an experience to live in fear, isn't it? That's what it is to be a slave.
By the way, that's the real stuntman not jumping far enough and grabbing onto that film.
Holy shit.
That was not intentional, and then they made it intentional.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, is that right?
That's amazing.
Wow, that is amazing.
Because it works
Roy
so well.
grabs him, and he's got the nail through his hand, and he grabs him, and he lifts him up, and he puts him down, and Deckard, like sits back, like in fear, like, oh, you're going to kill me. And Roy does that beautiful monologue.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate. All those moments will be lost in time. Like tears in rain. Time to die.
That he came up with and wrote himself.
The end.
Oh, wow.
The end.
Yes, the end.
The tears in rain.
And he's holding on to the dove.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, when the dove flies away, doves are not able to fly in rain. Just FYI. But that last scene that the water is dripping down his face, time to die.
Yeah.
And he just shuts down. Deckard is staring at him. What rises behind Batty? A spinner.
Yep.
Who steps out of the spinner? Gaff.
Yep.
What does he say?
You've done a man's job, sir.
You've done a man's job, sir. You've done a man's job.
Yep.
I guess you're through, huh? Finished.
Yeah.
He's walking away.
It's too bad she won't live. But then again, who does?
Which means he has figured out that she's a replicant too, or has it been like I guess they all know that she's a replicant, right?
I think they know.
So, but why does he spare her? Why does Gaff spare her when he could take her out and take out Roy in that moment?
Because he did a man's job.
Okay.
He did his job.
I think Gaff spares him because of if he's been following him, then he sees what Roy Batty does.
Like, why wasn't he helping him?
Well, I see. That's what I'm saying. What I'm saying, when he watches, if he's been following him, then he's been watching Roy Batty. And in this whole sequence, he watches this whole sequence. In the scene when Roy saves him instead of letting him die, maybe Gaff in that moment realizes that there's goodness and possibility of goodness in these replicants and understands their struggle and lets Deckard and Rachael live. And for whatever reason.
Like because Gaff was there, he was there the whole time.
Yeah.
He was watching the entire time. He saw it all.
I love this theory, by the way.
And I mean,
as a lover of film, I love this theory.
It's not just one scene. He shows either shows up before or after key moments in the film when these replicants are dying. And except for when Priss dies, because you know that Priss dies and then Batty dies. But for him to just always be there right in the nick of time, like there's got to be a reason for it. And I think it's because he is the one sort of pulling the strings the whole time. He is like Gaff is the Blade Runner.
Well, whether or not, and by the way, I have no objection to your theory.
Right.
What we do know, if we are on the assumption that he's a replicant, which I think in the final cut, there's no question that that's true, then this whole thing is some kind of strange experiment. Right?
That's fair.
They're going, what can we use replicants to hunt other replicants? And what will happen? It seems to be some kind of a not entirely controlled experiment. And so the fact that Gaff is observing them at the end is we're observing this experiment, to see what happens.
And Steve, it reinforces the idea that he's a unicorn.
Yeah.
Because he is an anomaly even within an anomaly.
Well, just as Rachel's an anomaly.
Right.
We're like, what
those two,
what are we doing here? They're kind of and
then they could be the next stage.
Now, what I can't explain, what I can't figure out is when Deckard goes back to fetch Rachael.
Yes.
And, do you love me? I love you. And he grabs her and they're going and they're walking across to the elevator and he picks up the origami and he's looking at it. And in his head, he hears what Gaff said again. Yeah. It's too bad she won't live, but then again, who does? And as he's hearing the dialogue in his head, he's looking at the unicorn. He's looking at the origami and he's shaking his head. Yes. He's shaking his head like he understands.
Yep.
Does he understand
That he's a replicant?
That he's a replicant.
Or does he understand that like Gaff spared her?
Right. But why?
But why? Right. But I'm saying he spared her maybe like as a thank you to him in a way.
Now in the director's cut and the final cut, they get in the elevator. That's it.
Thank God.
Thank God.
I love that ending. I hate the shot of them on the car going away. Like, where the fuck are you going?
Yeah,
by the way, you know where those shots come from?
Where?
That's outtakes from The Shining.
The Shining.
He called up Kubrick and said, "You must have shot more stuff."
What?
Yeah, that's
bastards.
What that is.
Does in the director's cut? I don't remember it. Does the dove still fly up into the sun?
Yes.
The brightly lit sky, which makes no sense at all.
It's all rain, and meanwhile, again, the dove is soaked because it's been raining the whole time.
I wish they cut that out.
Because Batty's been holding on to the dove the whole time.
Right. Which
There's
of course
no way
is
that
Jesus
dove would have
imagery
been able to fly. Because it had been soaking wet.
Right.
But by the way, that was shot on the last day of the shoot.
Wow.
And it was a 27-hour day.
What?
27-hour day.
Oh my God.
Oh,
and
boy.
they couldn't shoot because the sun is rising. They're shooting exteriors, so they had to tear down that whole rooftop corner set and move it into a soundstage and continue to shoot the whole time.
Good God.
All right, so you want to hear my theory?
Here we go. All right.
Okay. You already know mine, but let's hear yours.
Mine's more philosophical than actual, but here's my theory.
And if you know Steve Morris, this makes sense. Go ahead, yes?
I was thinking about this movie a lot, and it's been obsessing me over the last several days, and just keep thinking about it. And what I finally came to, and why the movie is so unsettling, and why it is so unique, is that Deckard is not the hero. Is that Deckard is the villain. He's a bad guy.
Ooh.
Is that if you look at the course of this movie, and it's both with the theatrical version and the director's cut, this is a guy who shows minimal amounts of remorse. We meet him. He's pushed fairly easily into going back to his job of being essentially an assassin. He goes to when he first sees Rachael when she comes to his apartment, he callously destroys her. Shoots Zhora in the back. And does he feel a little bad? A little bit. Then he is fairly pushy in the sex department with Rachael. There's never a sense of like he's going to save Sebastian or Tyrell. That's not his motivation. His motivation is to kill these people. That's it. And as they become more human in our eyes, I think, when you feel more compassion for them, there is nothing in him that is doing anything for a noble reason, almost at all throughout the film. As opposed to, imagine this movie, because I think this is what... So here's this story about these slaves that are living out in space, and we have a warrior slave and a worker slave and a sex slave, literally a sex slave, and somehow they manage to find each other and they form a family. And there's tons of evidence that these people think of themselves as a family. They manage through some heroic means that we don't know to escape bondage. They go back home. What's their only motivation? Their only motivation is for freedom and for life. In this film, they do not actually attack any innocent people. I don't think. None of the people that get hurt are innocent.
Well, Sebastian is.
Sebastian, who has been part of designing the slave race. This is a massive genocide. Millions of people, of human. And what do they say about them? They say, well, after 4 years, they start to develop emotions and a sense of identity. And so that is when we make sure that they die. So we've created a race of sentient beings. I mean, honestly, normal humans get a sense of identity at about 4 years old. But we've determined that we are going to, despite the fact that they are sentient and have real emotions, that we are going to kill all of them at 4 years because that's when they stop being useful by doing things like being sex slaves and warriors. So they come back, they find their makers. And to me, by the way, killing Tyrell is a completely justified act. The guy's like a Hitler. It is totally justified. And while they're doing this, there is some guy who is killing one by one every member of their family. And so they're the heroes.
My theory works in conjunction with yours. You realize that? My theory works in conjunction with yours. Because first of all, Roy Baty is the most sympathetic character in this movie. You're right. The replicants are it's like the Fast and Furious of the Blade Runner series. We're family. But yes, when like Leon dies and Baty goes to Priss and he says, it's only two of us now. I mean, he shows more emotion than anybody else.
And when Priss's death, this is his daughter. This is his sister.
So it's his girlfriend.
I don't know.
I think
maybe
it's
his girlfriend.
Whatever it is,
it's love. This is pure, true love.
Absolutely.
That moment when he kneels down to her, touches her lips and touches her wounds and puts the blood on his face was the biggest demonstration of humanity next to Batty saving right.
And this goes
Deckard.
to what is Roy's most important choice in the film? He has the person who has murdered his family.
Mm-hmm.
And what does he choose to do in the last moments of his life?
Right.
He doesn't kill him. Instead, he says, I'm going to try to spend my last moments teaching the person who has murdered my family that I am human and my life has meaning.
That's certainly fair, Steve.
Again, great theory.
Yeah.
I love it. Works in conjunction with mine.
Sure.
I don't 100% agree.
By the way, I'm not knocking down your theory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't 100% agree because you're conveniently leaving out Deckard's moments of humanity.
There are a few.
There are quite a few in this film. There are moments where he does not force Rachael to have sex with him. I disagree with that completely. Only the moment when he pushes her against the wall and then he's relaxed. But the way he makes love to her, they make love to each other. That is a real, very tender moment.
Okay.
And when he shows remorse for Zhora, that is legitimate remorse there. He resists. He doesn't want this job. We can't conveniently forget that fact at the beginning of this film. He wants to turn this job down. He does not want to have to do this, right? And what's his face pins him into a corner and says he has to do it. The only person he kills is a Priss. He does not kill Rachael. He does not kill Roy. He doesn't kill Leon. And he kills Zhora. I guess he kills Zhora, right? Yes. So that's the moment of remorse.
Was he going to kill Roy?
He was. Well, I think he was going to get there to kill Roy. Yeah, probably.
Well, and this is what's interesting too.
But Priss attacks first, and this is what's interesting. It removes his impetus.
His job is to kill them.
Right.
His job is not to arrest. I mean, honestly, they're going to die next week anyway.
But if his job is to kill them, why doesn't he just kill her in the fucking dressing room? While she's in the shower.
It's a good question.
That's what I'm saying to you. There's something
I'll
else
tell you
here.
why. Because he liked checking her out. That's why.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Shut up. I don't agree with that at all. That's good. I like that, Steve. My feeling is that he is exploring this for himself as well. And we don't know. All we know is what they tell us at the beginning, that he's a specialist in this. But we don't know if those memories are implanted in him, and we've never seen it, and he's never actually killed anybody.
No, that's very true.
And that's what I enjoy about the movie.
And it's interesting, too. Like, one of the differences in the theatrical...
But your theory works.
One of the differences in the theatrical version is that... Because originally I thought, the voiceover is just there to explain stuff we don't understand.
Right.
It actually isn't. Thinking about it this time is that almost every one of those voiceovers is an attempt to humanize him, to separate him from the evil of what he is actually doing.
That's a great point.
So in the first, we meet Emmett Walsh, and he says,
Skin jobs. That's what Bryant called replicants. In history books, he's the kind of cop used to call black men niggers.
So it shows, he sees the racism of this guy. Right. He goes, this will go in the books after Zhora dies.
The report would be routine retirement of a replicant, which didn't make me feel any better about shooting a woman in the back. There it was again. Feeling in myself for her.
So what we hear throughout the theatrical version is him mulling over, are these humans or are they not?
Right.
And that both makes him more human. It doesn't make him less of the bad guy to me.
Okay.
Because in the theatrical version, he's contemplating their humanity, but still acting in the same way. If you're contemplating their humanity, if he makes the comparison between replicants and black people at the very beginning of the movie, then what he is doing is even more evil.
Yeah.
Because he's already seen them as human.
That's fair.
If we take that out, then we don't have that window into his soul.
But he's our protagonist, so it's his journey, right? And
no question about it.
And I agree. And
it's just the journey of a bad guy.
I don't know if I wouldn't say that, but I see your point. I see your theory. I just think I think that end moment with Roy is really powerful, right? Because
beautiful,
and that's the only voiceover that I think should stay in the film is when he says,
"I don't know why he saved my life. Maybe in those last moments he loved life more than he ever had before. Not just his life, anybody's life."
And I think there's a power in that.
You're right. I agree that is actually the best of all the snippets of his voiceover.
Right.
But it's also something that we get anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, just that he's just looking at him.
Yeah, the
after
blinking.
he shuts down,
the
way he just has that hard blink, he was human.
Right.
He was human.
By the way, the movie of the replicants coming into consciousness and escaping their slavery as a family, I want to make that movie.
That prequel movie would be
The Revolution.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's the movie that I want to make.
I think if
Write
2049
it.
blows
Write it,
up,
Steve.
yeah,
Do it.
right.
Yeah.
If
It
2049
could be
blows
the
up,
Blade
why not?
Runner. You can have the Blade Runner cinematic universe.
Can you hook me up with Ridley Scott? And
I might be able to.
There you go.
All right,
I might be able to.
All right. Well, this Cine-Files is suddenly worth it, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, it is.
All right. Scott, could I ask you for your final thoughts on Blade Runner?
My final thoughts on Blade Runner is that Blade Runner is like a fine wine. It gets better with age. The fact that more people have discovered the film through the years, they've watched it over and over and over again. They have developed their own theories, like the three of us have, that they've dissected and absorbed the film, that it has influenced so much throughout Hollywood history these last 35 years, that the film has topped a movie like 2001: A Space Odyssey as the most groundbreaking and influential sci-fi movie of all time. Yeah. That the themes that the movie explores about humanity have been explored so many times on film and in TV shows like Battlestar Galactica, like Westworld. And
absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, and especially as we go further and further into the 21st century, where the themes of what it means to be human will become not just the stuff of entertainment, but reality.
Yeah.
I feel like Blade Runner will continue to manifest itself as a movie that will continue to get better with age.
Agreed. What about you?
This is one of my favorite films ever. It is one that whenever I revisit it, I'm immediately immersed in the world. It shakes my heart from beginning to end. It echoes inside my heart from beginning to end because of what it explores, what it exposes, and what it causes, the journey it causes you to go on, as Scott was saying here, the themes that you have to explore. But also cinematically, it's one of the most amazingly beautiful sci-fi films to watch. Still ahead of its time, even here in 2017. I think it's Harrison Ford's best performance, in my opinion, of any film he's ever been in. And I think Sean Young is never better. I think Daryl Hannah is never better.
Yeah.
Rutger Hauer is never better.
Agreed.
This is, and I would argue that Ridley Scott is never better. And this whole film is a moment in time where everyone is in their prime, and it is one of the most fantastic pieces of film, and it may be the greatest noir ever this side of Touch of Evil, which we have already talked about on the Cine-Files. And one thing I think is really interesting that we didn't touch on is Roy's poem when he walks in and he says, the fiery angels that fell, deep thunder rolled around their shores, burning with fires of orc. It's adapted from Blake's America, a Prophecy. The actual line is, fiery the angels rose, and they rose, deep thunder rolled around their shores, indignant burning with the fires of orc. The orc is this powerful creature, and the story of the orc is the son killing the father, the young replacing the old, and it is this whole thing. And so there's so much about this that is evocative. And when I watched it in my 20s, got it. When I watched it in my 40s, powerful. Like, it's like, as my life is ending, as I'm getting closer to my life ending, there's more power in this movie than it was when I watched it in my 20s. I no longer watch it as a cinematic masterpiece. Now I watch it as a treatise on life. And that's what this movie is.
To clarify what you said, Ridley Scott has never been better, and it is even better than Alien. Yes! 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 Listen, that was what makes the Cine-Files worth it, mister. That is it. Finally, yes!
You can't claim I won movie fights and then try to destruct every point I made. All right. There we go. All right. Steve, your final thoughts.
My thoughts. Well, first of all, when I watched it with my wife, she said something, and I think she might be right, which is that this might be the most beautiful designed film of any film I can think of. The look of this film is unlike anything else. Mm-hmm. Every single detail, every single color, every single prop, set design, costume design, it is absolutely gorgeous. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting to me that I was thinking about is partially it's because of Harrison Ford. It gets put with those movies like Star Wars and Empire and Raiders and all of these films. And anyone going to see it, I think, would have the same reaction that you had as a kid, which is that this is not one of those. In fact, in a lot of ways, this is more of a 70s movie than an 80s movie. For this reason, is that it is dark, it is brooding, it is hard to decipher, it has a lot of complicated questions that it just leaves out there and doesn't answer. And was one of the interesting things I found watching it this time. So when we're getting ready to do a movie, I always watch a movie with my iPad in my lap because I take copious notes because I want to, like, every thought that occurs to me, something I want to do research on, something I want to explore, anything from behind the scenes, I'm always taking notes when I watch the film. When I watched Blade Runner, I barely took a note. I just didn't have anything to write down. Right. And part of that was I was just in the film.
Yeah.
And part of that is that I just was like, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
You know? And then it took days and days since I watched it and thinking about it to figure out what I wanted to say about the film. That's how profound I found this film. When I watched it, it stunned me to silence. And those of you who know me know I am not an easy person to shut up.
It's very true.
So,
to stun into silence. I would say to stun into silence. I wouldn't say shut up. But what you said, Steve, is absolutely right, and I echo 100% what you say. This is above those films. It's above Star Wars. It's above, to me, it's a more elevated take on science fiction than what you'd find in Star Wars or Star Trek or anything else. And Star Trek does explore these themes more powerfully than Star Wars does, but there's something about Blade Runner that's a whole nother level.
I don't like above. I like to me.
That's why I'm saying it.
Yeah, no,
I'm saying it.
I understand that.
Yes.
But to me, it's just a different continent. Like I don't like to put.
Oh, that's
like
fair.
I don't like to take a genre, because it's like, is Lawrence of Arabia a deeper film than
Godfather?
Than Airplane?
Okay.
Yes, it is. But Airplane is at the top of where it is.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? And so this is apples and oranges to Empire Strikes
Well,
Back.
sci-fi genre.
It's an entirely different kind of flying
altogether. Well, don't you say things transcend? Wouldn't you say it transcends? I think it transcends the genre.
It does.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, it absolutely transcends the genre.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious, and don't call me Shirley. Okay, so that's what we
My father
think
says,
of Blade Runner.
hustle back on defense. Yeah, okay.
Hey, the white soda's for the immediate loading and unloading of passengers only.
That's enough.
Have you ever been to a Turkish bath?
You're the one who wanted to have an abortion.
All right, so next time on the Cine-Files with Scott Mantz, you want to do Airplane?
Airplane?
Yes, Airplane
my
it
God.
is.
Oh my God.
Airplane it is.
Really?
I love
Yeah.
All right. Let's do it.
I love it. Okay, so that's what we think of Blade
It was
Runner.
then that I discovered that I had a drinking problem.
Oh, so many great lines.
Hey, wait. What a pisser.
Oh my God.
I knew I picked the last week to stop sniffing glue. So that's what we think about Blade Runner. We want to hear what you think about Blade Runner. Visit us on Facebook at the Cine-Files, CINE-FILES. Subscribe to us on Stitcher, CINE-Files. You can subscribe to us on iTunes. When you're on iTunes, leave us a review. You haven't done it yet. You know you want to. It's time. You owe it to the Cine-Files and to yourself to leave us a review. If you don't, how will we know that you're fully human?
Yes.
Make sure you go back and watch Blade Runner in 1 hour and 8 minutes. You will see Harrison Ford's eyes glow, proving that he is a replicant. And trust me, Gaff is the Blade Runner.
And maybe they should visit you on Twitter when they find that.
You
Where
can
would they
definitely hit us up on Twitter. You can find me. My handle is at Movie Mantz. That's with the TZ. I'm also on Instagram at Movie Mantz, and you can watch me on Access Hollywood, and you can watch me on the Schmodown and on Movie Fights with my arch enemy John Stephen Roca.
And you can reach me at SR Morris on Twitter. And John, where can they reach you?
You guys can always reach me at The Rocha Says, ROCHA, on Twitter and on Instagram. Every Friday on Collider Movie Talk of obviously the Cine-Files. Please subscribe to us on our YouTube page as well.
Oh, that's right. We have a YouTube page.
Every one of these goes right to YouTube, so you can watch them in the privacy of your home while you're cleaning your house or hanging out at your house if you don't want to listen to it on iTunes. And so we want to make this as accessible to everybody as possible. And I want to thank everybody who's commented, who's sent us tweets, who's pushed us into the top tier of TV and film for Podomatic. Thank you so much for doing that for us. We really appreciate it. And Scotty, definitely, Star Trek 2 put us up in the number 6 or 7.
So happy to hear that.
Yeah, you were amazing. Great. People were so in love the episode.
That makes me happy.
So
thanks for having me on again, fellas. I appreciate it.
And I want to personally thank you for coming because I always love doing a movie with you.
It's always a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure.
It's been great having you, Scott.
Thanks, Steve.
And that's it for this week. We will see you next time on the Cine-Files.